Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel and welcome to my Omnibus series. I've got so many of these omnibuses that are going to come out so that you'll be able to listen to an hour's worth of stories, which I know you're going to love. You know, the thing is that telling stories is such a fine art, and it's something that was practiced hundreds of years ago when people didn't have the technology that we have today. And everyone would gather around the fire and listen to a wonderful story. And also, what is so wonderful about a story is that personally, I think it is the best way to go to sleep. Every night when I go to bed, I always listen to stories. And that's something that parents used to do with their children. It's something that they still do with their children. There's nothing better than a good story. And so I hope you're going to enjoy this series. And before we start, I just want to say, do subscribe to my channel because you don't want to miss out on anything. Because I'm in for the long haul and I want to make sure that you get the most stunning stories to go to bed with at night or to listen to when you want to be one of those people sitting beside the fire and listening. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and let's get started. I hope you're going to enjoy the omnibus.
Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, my heart was pounding in my chest so loudly that I could hear it in my ears. I felt like a guilty man robbing a bank vault, terrified that my treacherous crime might be unearthed. My breathing had become fast and furious. I was a reasonably fit man who didn't exactly tire easily from arduous physical activity. Ostensibly, it was the tangled web of my personal emotions that was weaving all kinds of precarious knots inside of me, that had sent my physical body into quite the spin. So much so that I might as well have been climbing Mount Everest, as the grievous weight of what I had done all those years ago was now pressing heavily upon my heart with such a forceful, almost crushing guilt, as if I was carrying 100 invisible backpacks along with me on this intrepid journey. By all accounts, these feelings were made 1,000 times worse for me, finding myself again in this part of the world. The familiar smell of pine needles was bringing nostalgia back to my door, with a violent burst of wistful memories that I couldn't ignore, and despite the passage of time, I had never been able to blot away. Some of my recall was pleasingly sweet and very beautiful. Why had I come back after all these years? What on earth was I expecting to accomplish by spying on Missy and her children, and taking a brief look into her world, rather like pulling back a curtain and looking into somebody else's life, or shaking up one of those Christmas balls and staring into the snowy scene of a pretty picture that you are so far removed from? I almost felt as perverse as a peeping Tom, but the restless spirit inside of me had persuaded me to do this. I had come all this way from Houston in Texas to be here now. Maybe it was a very foolish thing for me to do. It probably was. Life had moved on with a dogged efficiency, as it always does, for time waits for no one. The world had continued to rotate around and around on its axis. People everywhere, whoever they were, had adapted to the changes that life had brought upon them, whatever those changes might be. Husbands who had lost wives, wives who had lost husbands, even beloved children or much-loved family pets that were sadly extinguished from their lives. Somehow these people had stoically, very courageously picked up the pieces of their lives. As impossibly difficult and tumultuous as it may be, they had invariably been forced to make the best of a bad situation. They didn't have a choice in the matter. That's what they had done, some invariably faring better than others. But in general, human beings are remarkably resilient. They have admirable ways of picking themselves up, even when they fall down. So I had great faith in Missy, that she would have done much the same, with her indomitable courage. She was a woman who could brave almost any storm. and in our relationship at the time she had been the strong one in the family, holding us all together with the cement of her unconditional love, a love she had lovingly lavished all over me, that I had not been worthy of receiving. I, on the other hand, had been the coward in the relationship. There is no other word for it. I was a loser, looking for an easy way out, an escape from the shackles of life. And now I was back to take a long, hard look at what I had obviously left behind, and at what could have been if I hadn't bogged off in the way I had done and screwed up my life because of fear. Let's not kid. Fear can cruelly damage our lives, sabotaging us from making any progress and robbing us of the quintessential ability of taking risks that might just be the very making of us. You hear about it all the time. People who took a risk on an idea. Years later they had millions to show for it, due to their conviction and courage. So they had pursued something, despite the obstacles that were thrust on their path, which they gallantly overcame, refusing to allow the curse of doubt to bring them down. I guess it was a mixture of curiosity and intrigue, a desire to know how Missy and the children were faring after all these years, that had brought me into the woodgrove today. Although my children would now be in their late teens by now, it had been that long since I'd come to this part of the world. I knew Missy was still living in Tumbledown Cottage, as my mother, who regularly saw her grandchildren, had informed me. My faithfully loyal mother, known to her friends as Hattie, had kept storm about my whereabouts to Missy, saying she had heard absolutely nothing from me since I seemingly disappeared from their lives, never to be seen or heard from again. My mother would have done anything to cover my tracks, as like any devoted, long-suffering mother, she'd have easily taken a bullet for me, if needs must. Missy had inherited Tumbledown Cottage from her grandmother, who she'd always called Gammy, as she had not been able to pronounce the R sound in the word granny when she was very little, and I guess the name just stuck. Tumbledown Cottage was bequeathed to her when Gammy had died in 1992. Missy had absolutely adored Gammy, and it hit her hard when the old lady keeled over and died on her favourite rocking chair on the wraparound porch at the back of the property that overlooked the woodgrove. It would seem on the day she had died she had looked so serene and peaceful that Missy had thought her grandmother was fast asleep. It had come as quite the shock to her that Gammy had died sitting back on her favourite chair, admiring the view. But as far as Missy was concerned, it was a great way for the old lady to go. Tumbledown Cottage had earned its name because it had a crooked chimney, and also looked as if it was slightly lopsided on one side, almost as if the original builder of the cottage had been a little short-sighted when he had been building the place, or maybe half-cut. This was a long-standing joke with Missy's family. Whether it was true or not, I have no idea. But regardless, the builder had managed to build Tumbledown Cottage at a rather odd angle, so it looked as if it was sliding off the land. But in a strange way, the slight higgledy-piggledy gait of the cottage had given the place oodles of character. Gammy had fallen head over heels in love with Tumbledown Cottage and its beguiling charms, the first time she'd laid eyes on the place. She was in her early 20s at the time, and had luckily received a generous inheritance from her grandfather, which meant she was able to buy the place. To all intents and purposes, she spent the remainder of her married life at Tumbledown Cottage with her husband Rolf, who had died 5 years before Gammy passed away, from a very bad bout of pneumonia. I understand he was a lovely man. Gammy had always said life was never perfect. She liked things to be a little off-centre. Ostensibly during the course of Missy's grandmother's life, the woman had taken in 2 dogs, both with missing legs, a cat that had got its tail run over in a hit-and-run accident, and the tail had been thus amputated, and a bird with a broken wing. Missy's grandmother liked things that were rather broken, and when she purchased Tumbledown Cottage, she was drawn to its imperfections, which she found beautiful in their eccentric, somewhat unorthodox uniqueness. "I don't like perfection," Gammy would tell Missy. "There's something so commercialized about perfection. I like things that don't follow traditional stereotypes of beauty. A wonky cottage like this is absolutely unique, so very special. Nobody else has a cottage quite like mine. So in its own way, Tumbledown Cottage is absolutely priceless." In the circumstances, I never believed Missy would ever bring herself to sell Gammy's cottage, because of the attachment she felt towards her late grandmother. She always felt as if Gammy was around and about the place, almost as if she had never left, and was still very much in residence at Tumbledown Cottage, watching over us. I had personally been very sceptical. It was wishful thinking on Missy's part as far as I was concerned, a way of coping with Gammy's death, by telling herself that Gammy was still very much around, for that made her passing a lot more bearable. Sometimes when there was a spirited breeze in the yard, the rocking chair that Gammy would sit on would suddenly begin to move on its own accord, swinging backwards and forwards, as if someone was sitting there and rocking away. Wistful tears would come into Missy's eyes, and she would say, "Goodness gracious me! Gammy is out there sitting on the rocking chair. It's moving on its own. She's watching over us. I know she is." I would say, "Don't be ridiculous. The wind is causing the rocking chair to move. It is not Gammy." Missy would glare at me contemptuously and say, "I'm telling you it's Gammy. She's still here with us." I don't think she could bear to believe otherwise. I decided to humour her and say, "You're probably right. She's still out there, love." I would put my arms lovingly around her, and she would respond by looking adoringly into my eyes. She would look very tearful and desperately sad. "I miss Gammy so much." She would almost choke in her lugubrious melancholia. I would say, "But of course you do, love, of course you do. And that's perfectly understandable. Grief is a very hard thing. And Gammy was very special to you, was she not?" "She sure was," Missy would say. "God broke the mould when he made Gammy." Missy had wanted to raise our children in the sumptuous coziness of Tumbledown Cottage in this rural part of Washington State. I think living in Gammy's old cottage made her feel as if Gammy was still very much around. I had naturally wanted us to move away, to start our lives anew, somewhere more practical for a growing family. But Missy was having none of it. She resolutely told me with a fierce determination that this is where we would raise our children, and she wouldn't have it any other way. For all I knew, with 15 years under her belt since I walked out of my family's life, Missy could very well be in a serious relationship by now, with a devoted, loving man, far more deserving of her than I had ever been. I knew nothing about Missy's relationships, as even though my mother saw her regularly when Missy dropped off our children at my mother's house, and they would spend valuable time with their grandmother, she had never told my mother even once about the personal details of her life, or if she was actually dating someone. She was as elusive and ambiguous as a closed book, as far as that was concerned. But then again, Missy was always a reserved person, who kept the matters of her heart close to her chest. She never aired her dirty laundry, even to close family members. She had always been a lady in that regard, and for her talking about the intimate details of her life was exceedingly vulgar. If Gammy was alive, it would have been a different thing altogether, for Missy had told Gammy everything. In truth, I don't think Missy fully trusted my mother. They had never been particularly close. I think she secretly surmised that my mother knew a lot more about my disappearance from my family's life than my mother cared to admit. I had learnt from my mother Missy and the kids were doing very well, and that had given me peace of mind. It made it easier for me not to be burdened by my guilt of having left them in the way I did. By all accounts, Missy was happy, and that was all that mattered as far as I was concerned, and so were our children, although they were grown up by now, in their teens. My mother never made me feel condemned or ashamed for walking away from my children's lives, although having said that, now they were teenagers. She would say to me, "You did what you did, son. It felt right for you at the time, didn't it? You were very relieved to escape the pressure that Missy was putting on you." Well, that was true. In the 15 years I'd been away, I had missed Missy dreadfully, and after having dated other women, I knew Missy was a valuable jewel, but it was too late to pontificate with the burden of what-ifs. I had made my choices that had driven me away from Missy's life, and regret was an indulgence I could ill afford. "I hope, Hattie, that you really are as clueless as you claim to be, as to the whereabouts of your son," Missy had said to my mother, eyeing her suspiciously through narrowing eyes, as if to say my mother wasn't fooling her for a single second. "Oh, by the way, Hattie, if you ever do find Alex, or he does happen to get in touch with you, you can tell him for me that I really did not appreciate him bogging off into the sunset without a by your leave, practically dumping me at the altar like an old sack of seeded potatoes, and leaving me to take charge of our children without any help from him. What he did, Hattie, was insanely cruel. Good thing I never married the douchebag. Your son is a loser. How could he have done that to me? He was completely gutless. If he wanted out of our relationship, he only had to tell me. Not running away like he did, leaving a pathetic note for me, telling me he couldn't do this. He didn't have the decency to tell this to my face. No, he scurried away like a frightened mouse. It was pathetic. He should have manned up and faced me, told me the truth. When I think back on what he did, I'm mortified. Tell Alex from me, Hattie, we don't need him in our lives, and we're doing perfectly fine without him." "Missy," my mother would assure her, "I can't possibly tell him that. I don't know where he is," she would lie. Missy had rolled her eyes in the back of her head, very, very sceptically. "I find that hard to believe, Hattie. I really do. When Alex went missing, isn't it funny, everybody else was in such a state except you. You remained fastidiously calm. You never even batted an eyelash. Even my mother thought your behaviour was decidedly odd. She said she knew that you were still in touch with Alex, and I think she's right about that. You know where he is. Think what you want, dear, but I haven't heard a bean from my son. Yes, I admit I was calm when he disappeared, because I know he needs space to find himself. I think Alex is a bit of a lost soul, you know. Don't take this so personally, love. Try and see things from my son's point of view. This is not about you. It's never been about you. It's about him." Missy had put her trembling hands on very angry hips and looked defiantly at my mother. "What is this point of view, Hattie, that you're talking about? Go on, tell me, because I fail to see it." "Well, life was very difficult for Alex growing up, love. You must try and appreciate that. I got married 5 times, and by anyone's standards, 5 times is a lot of times to get married. So there were 5 divorces. One by one, my son saw these seemingly very nice men suddenly morph into dictatorial monsters. They'd push me around and demean me all the time. These men thought I was a doormat that they could tread on, but they were wrong about that. I might have looked like a woman that they could easily push around, but I gave as good as I got. Unfortunately, I always drew into my life the wrong kind of men. But Alex was witness to all these relationship blunders and all the devastation it caused. Is it any wonder he got cold feet about marrying you when you laid on the pressure?" "So is that what Alex told you?" Missy had asked. "Did he tell you I pressurized him into getting married? Because that is not true." "But it is true, love. You couldn't have been more obvious if you tried. Alex would come home to find you sifting through bridal magazines, pointing out beautiful bridal dresses and talking about weddings non-stop. When you were in town together, you would drag him along to the jewelry shop and point out the diamond engagement rings that you liked in the window. You kept going on and on about all your girlfriends all being married, and you feeling as if you were left on the shelf to rot. You kept telling him you didn't want to become an old maid. He told me he felt pushed into a corner. That was why in the end he did propose to you, and he bought you a diamond engagement ring. But he didn't want to propose to you. He didn't feel that he had a choice in the matter. Your presumptuousness took that away from him, dear. He told you that, Missy had asked, but I had no idea I was laying on the pressure to him. We had children together, for goodness sake. And he still hadn't popped the question. I tried to give him a nudge in the right direction, and when he proposed to me, I thought he wanted to get married to me as much as I wanted to marry him. A nudge in the right direction? Is that what you call it, love? It was more like a great big pushy shove, like someone on the diving board being pushed into the water by the person behind them. They've got no option, have they, but to dive straight into the water from a great height, even if they don't want to. I guess he got cold feet about getting married to you. He told me often enough that he loved the bones of you, Missy, but he wasn't ready to make a permanent commitment to you. So when he put that engagement ring on your finger, he was not in a good place, let me tell you. But why didn't he tell me all that, Hattie? Instead, he just bogs off, leaving me to raise our children on my own. We could have resolved this easily, talked about things together, reached a compromise, could we not? I do know that there are couples out there that live together and never get married because they don't want to. If push had come to shove, I'd have done the same thing with Alex. But no, he didn't even give me an opportunity to talk about it. Well, you do surprise me, dear. You were very pushy about getting married. You made it absolutely clear to my son that there was no other option for him. You may not have said so in many words, but let's just say actions speak volumes, and you were far from subtle. My son would come home and find a huge pile of wedding magazines lying on the coffee table. You had circled all the venues, the cakes you wanted, the dresses you liked in red pen. You couldn't have been more obvious than shoving a dog's nose into its puddle of urine. Well, I'm not proud of myself, Hattie. You're right. I was a little in his face about getting married, but I loved Alex. I wanted a future with him. Is there anything wrong with that? We loved each other. Now he abandons me. How could he be so cruel? Why did he not give me the opportunity to talk about all this? I just don't understand any of it. Has he been in touch with you, Hattie? Please tell me. I need to know. I told you, love, I haven't heard a word from him. I wish I could believe you, Hattie, when you say that so nonchalantly. But I just don't buy it. My mother's right. You know exactly where he is. But you refuse to tell me. The police aren't any better, of course. They won't help me find him. They say he's an adult. He's free to make his own choices in life, and he's not even married to me. The fact that he's left our children doesn't seem to bother them in the slightest. You're the one that's been giving me money for the children. But what about Alex? He's the biological father. He's the one that should be doing it, not you. That's true, but Missy, as I said, I've been giving you the maintenance money on behalf of my son. Is that not enough for you? That's not the point, Hattie. It's Alex that should be giving me the maintenance, not you. I should be speaking to him. I should have contact with him. But you refuse to let me know where he is, and it's not fair. My mother would keep telling Missy over and over again that no, she had never heard from me. But she would help Missy in any way she could, including financially, to raise our children. But Missy had always given her that scrutinizing, disapproving look, as if she was reading my mother like a book, and emphatically believed my mother knew a lot more than she was letting on. Missy was perfectly within her rights to be outraged by my idiosyncratic behavior when I walked out of her life and the lives of my 3 beloved children 15 years ago. I mean, who in their right mind does that? Who abandons the people they love more than anything else in the world? If the truth be told, I don't know the answer to that enigmatic question myself. Let's just say the webs we weave can be so complicated and complex we don't understand them ourselves. I think many people haven't figured out who they are, or there would not be so much confusion in this world today. Even I don't know why I did what I did all those years ago, in a moment of impulse, when life suddenly got too much for me, and the fear of being tied down to Missy for the rest of my life got the better of me. I suppose I panicked, like a frightened wild animal, locked up in a zoo enclosure that desperately wants to escape the confines of its imprisonment, but it has no easy way to do so. I knew I shouldn't have walked out on the children like I did. I hated myself for what I'd done, but I also felt heartily relieved to escape the responsibility of being a father. I guess I knew that Missy would do an amazing job mothering the children, and they would be absolutely fine under her charge. She would soon settle into her new life, and if she married someone else who adopted our children, then so be it. There was nothing I could do to stop that. I wanted Missy to be happy, so why would I begrudge her anything? I tried to imagine how devastating it must have been for our children not to know what had become of their father. But then again, they were very young at the time, 2 toddlers and 1 baby, so they would barely remember me when I left. As for Missy, I can't imagine what my note on the side table must have done to her. All it said was, "I can't do this any more, Missy. Don't even bother to try and find me. Love to you and the kids. Love you always." I had wrestled decidedly with guilt over the years, knowing what I had done was not good. I had just not wanted to take responsibility for Missy and the children. It had all got too consuming for me, and I had bolted from my life like a horse from the stable. I had dragged myself back to Washington State, and was now in a wood grove that overlooked Tumbledown Cottage, just to get a glimpse into the life that I had left behind. It was also upon the insistence of my best friend Barry Longersteam, who had persuaded me to come here, after I spilled out the clandestine secret I'd been nursing from him all these years. When I revealed my secret to Barry, I can't say he seemed remotely surprised by my startling revelations. Instead, he said, "I knew it. I knew you were keeping something from me. Sometimes you have this far-away, almost haunted look in your eyes, a lost look. I could see that you'd been stewing over something for a very long time. But I figured to myself, when you were ready to tell me, you would talk about it. It's very, very sad that you walked away from a loving relationship and children. But human beings are complicated. I learned that a long time ago, and sometimes we don't know why we do the things we do. I had a cousin, for example. Her name is Rachel. She used to forever go shoplifting, always got caught and arrested by the police. She had absolutely no reason to do this. She was married to an attorney, happily married, I might add, had lots of money and a fulfilling life, and yet she didn't know why she got this impulse to shoplift. She wouldn't even take things that she didn't even particularly like. I remember one time she actually stole some pig ears from the butcher. Finally, she went to see a therapist about her problem, who told her she stole things because she wanted to get into trouble. She felt she deserved to be punished for having life so good. After she understood that she wanted to hurt herself because it gave her a feeling of relief, like people who self-harm, she never shoplifted again. "Wow, that is quite some story," I said. "But you do make a good point, Barry. Sometimes we do things we don't understand, for reasons unknown. That's why no one can condemn you, bro. No one can judge you. If you want my advice, if you need to take a look at your old life, then for goodness sake do it. No harm done as far as I'm concerned. It'll be a great opportunity for you to see your mother again, in Washington State. But you're going to have to be discreet when you visit her. You certainly don't want Missy to learn you're back. If it makes you feel more reassured and comforted to physically witness with your own eyes that Missy and the children are all right, then do it. Your mother assures you that they're doing well. But I get and understand that you need to see this for yourself. So what's stopping you, bro? You messed up all those years ago. I get it. We all make mistakes, don't we? You need to forgive yourself for this one, or your guilt will bury you alive. That's the trouble. I can't forgive myself, Barry. Despite my mother's assurances that Missy and the children are doing well, although they're not children anymore, they're teenagers, it doesn't take back what I did. My children were practically babies when I left them. Imagine abandoning the woman you love when she needs you the most. That's what I did to Missy. I've been carrying the weight of this guilt for all these years. When I left Missy and my children, I thought it would be a clean slate for me, a brand new beginning, if you know what I mean. But I never ever felt free after I left her. I was riddled with shame, especially leaving her in the lurch like that without children to raise on her own. But at the very same time, I just could not bring myself to stay with her. Not if it meant us getting married. For some reason, getting married for me was tantamount to someone putting a noose around my neck, as if from thenceforth I would be a condemned man. Well, I get it, bro. I really do, said Barry. Some men feel that way about marriage, as do some women. A fear of committing is very common. By the sounds of things, your mother is to blame for all of this. You witnessed your mother going through 5 marriages and 5 divorces, with men treating her very badly. That is not easy for any young boy to witness. No wonder you were freaked out about getting married. Your mother was hardly a positive role model. Do you love Missy? He suddenly asked me. But of course I love her. I've never felt about a woman like I felt towards her. You know what I'm like, Barry, with other women. Pretty useless. But with Missy I could be myself. We had been dating since high school, you see. We connected. We could almost finish each other's sentences. When she fell pregnant, I did the right thing by her and moved in with her straight away. We settled down at Tumbledown Cottage together, which initially belonged to her late grandmother Gammy. I naively thought that that was how things would happily remain forever. We were very happy together. We made a comfortable life for ourselves, and Missy's grandmother had left her a nice little nest egg, along with Tumbledown Cottage, which was a huge help for us financially. It gave us the flying start we needed in life. Missy fell pregnant 2 more times during the course of our relationship, and that was fine by me. I was excited about the arrival of our 2 other children. But after Missy kept dropping hints that we should get married, I felt the pressure piling on to commit. I had asked her to marry me. I had bought her an engagement ring. And I really didn't want to marry her. I panicked, and the only thought in my head was to get the hell away. How did Missy pressurize you to get married? Barry asked me curiously. Was she dropping wild hints like women sometimes do? Absolutely. By all accounts, I would return home after a hard day at work, and Missy would be sitting on the sofa sifting through a pile of glossy wedding magazines, and be flicking through pictures pointing at dresses, venues, and cakes that she had circled with red pen. She couldn't have been more obvious if she tried. It was her unsubtle way of dragging me to making a decision about getting married that I felt compelled to make. "Look at this wedding dress, Alex," she would ooh and ah, with a longing look in her eyes. "Don't you think it's absolutely stunning? Oh, I'd love to wear a dress like this for my wedding day, but I wouldn't want a big wedding. I went to Amanda Forrester's wedding. There were over 300 guests there, and no expense spared. But I felt rather lost at her wedding, like a sparrow among the pigeons. I don't want anyone to feel that about my wedding. I'd like about 80 guests at the most, and an intimate ceremony. I like the idea of getting married on a beach somewhere. Hawaii would be a great location, don't you think? Or somewhere in Florida, perhaps.
If our guests are willing to pay for their travel costs, of course. Or we could always just get married alone on a beach somewhere, and then return to Washington State and have a big party. That's also a great option, don't you think?
I'm not sure, I would say. I haven't given the matter much thought. I'm perfectly content with the way things are between us. We're both committed, are we not? Do we really need to get married? When I said that, you should have seen Missy's face. It was as if I had struck her down hard across the face with a baseball bat or something.
But Alex, wake up! We have 3 children. Our youngest is barely 1 year old. Everybody our age is now married. People tie the knot when they have children, don't they? It's the right thing to do, isn't it? We love each other, so we should get married. It doesn't make sense living together like this. If Gammy was still alive, she'd say you had dishonoured me by not getting down on your knees to propose like you should. Gammy had strong opinions on marriage and would consider us to be living in sin. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, Alex. You're the love of my life. Tying the knot together makes perfect sense, does it not? Why are you giving me that funny look?
What do you mean I'm giving you a funny look? I said, my skin burning the colour of a bright red fire engine.
You look as if I've just told you that your mum died. Goodness gracious me, Alex. I can't understand you. I mean, we've been together for such ages, and you still haven't proposed to me. I don't get it, Alex. I really don't.
I just think we shouldn't rush things, that's all.
Rush things? Are you insane, Alex? We have 3 children together, and I still haven't walked down the aisle with you. If we leave it any longer, I'll be hobbling down the aisle when I'm 83 years old.
Don't be ridiculous, Missy.
Ridiculous? You think that's ridiculous, do you? How many of my friends have asked me, when is Alex going to pop the question to you and make an honest woman out of you? I have to lie to them and say we've put things on hold for a moment. But I can't keep fobbing them off, can I?
Oh dear, said Barry sympathetically. I can see Missy put the pressure on you, and you felt as if you were backed into a tight corner. Pretty much. That is pressure. You probably felt as if she was making all the decisions, and that's not a good feeling. You would have liked to have proposed to her in your own steam, not have it rudely thrust upon you like that. No wonder you panicked. I might have done the same if I were wearing your shoes. Don't get me wrong, Barry. I do understand why Missy wanted to settle down to married life with me. Besides, we loved each other and were happy together. Furthermore, we had 2 toddlers and a 1-year-old baby, so getting married was the obvious thing to do. So I dutifully went off and bought an engagement ring for her. I took her out to dinner at an exclusive restaurant, and I asked her to marry me. But do you know what? I felt no joy doing any of this, because it was forced on me. Well, of course you didn't feel any joy. Anyone in your circumstances would understand that. I laughed as I remembered the night of my proposal to Missy. She'd almost lost a tooth in her ice cream sundae when she bit on her engagement ring. It was probably foolish of me to hide it in the ice cream, I told Barry with a muted laugh. She was all dewy-eyed, very sentimental, shedding tears at the table and saying, "Is this what I think this is?" She wiped the ice cream off the ring and squealed with delight, so much so that the entire restaurant's attention was focused directly on us. She wiped the ice cream off the ring and put it on her finger, and stared at the diamond with wondrous awe on her face, saying how magnificently beautiful it was. It really was just a simple diamond. She looked at me adoringly in the eyes and said, "You're the very best, Alex McDuffie, the absolute best. I thought you'd never ask. This is the best day of my life. Of course I'll marry you, Alex." The truth is, Barry, I hate to admit this to you, but I felt completely dead on the inside. I did not want to get married. I guess I really was damaged goods. When the restaurant realized I'd proposed to Missy, everyone began to clap and cheer. One generous man sitting at a nearby table ordered us a bottle of the finest French champagne to celebrate our engagement, which was an extremely generous thing for him to do, as he didn't know us from Adam. But I felt that I had been fished out of a stream and would shortly be thrown into the frying pan to get cooked. In short, I felt like a trapped man. "So what did your mother think about all this?" Barry asked me. "I mean, she'd probably learnt quite a lot about the game of marriage, having been married so many times. Did she tell you to do the right thing by Missy, given you had 3 children with her? Surely she wanted her grandchildren to be raised in a stable environment. That is what every grandmother would want." "No, on the contrary, she told me not to do it." "She told you not to marry Missy? But why would she do that? Isn't that decidedly strange?" Barry asked me. "I hardly think it's strange, Barry, in the circumstances. As you keep reminding me, my mother was married and divorced 5 times. Those marriages sucked the marrow out of her bones. You know the saying, 'Once bitten, twice shy.' Well, in my mother's case, being married 5 times was 5 times too many. She realized pretty quickly that marriage was not for her, and that her negative experiences with relationships had rubbed off on her in a bad way, leaving a bitter aftertaste in her mouth, and in mine as well, I suspect. As every time my mother got married, let's not kid, I was inadvertently facing a complete overhaul in my life again, having to embrace yet again a brand new stepfather. So I guess I developed a subconscious aversion to the institution of marriage, so to speak." "Well, I suppose that makes sense to me. I can't imagine what it must have been like having 5 stepfathers. That must have really sucked for you. I never realized how lucky I was growing up in my family, where my parents had a stable relationship. Of course they had their moments, their ups and downs, but things worked out well for us, and we were a happy family. I guess I just took all that for granted. You have no idea how lucky you were, Barry. I mean, for me, it was tough. In the beginning, I'd seen how nice these suitors were to my mother. Before they proposed to her, that is. But after they married her and became my stepfathers, these 5 men, including my own father, I hasten to say, walked all over her, as if she was a dog turd on the ground. They treated her abysmally, with disdain and disrespect. And even though I was young, I could see how cruel they were to my mother. They may not have physically abused her, but mentally they wore her down like sandpaper, with their abrasive, unkind words, and I had to witness it all. I remember thinking to myself, why did my mother bother to marry any of these men? It would have been so much easier if she had just lived with them. And it would have been easier to walk away because there wouldn't have been all the shenanigans of that paperwork that tends to come with marriage. My mother seemed to draw men into her life that were all misogynists, so to speak, who believed women should be in bed, pregnant, and in the kitchen. The one thing I'll say about my mother, Barry, is that all the men who married her completely underestimated her strength of character and her dogged resilience. I think they thought they were marrying a woman that would be so easy to control. You see, my mother was a small, unassuming woman, on the outside, who looked like she wouldn't say boo to a goose, which I think was the quintessential reason the men were attracted to her in the very first place. Well, the kind of men that my mother tended to attract. They thought they'd be able to dominate her, but they picked the wrong woman when they chose my mother. By all accounts, appearances can be extremely deceptive. My mother had nerves of steel. She didn't suffer fools gladly. She dumped those men like hot potatoes, one after the other, and I was proud of her for that. And you should be, Alex. Your mother sounds like a tough old bird. But all the same, you're having to live with 5 stepfathers, one after the other. That had to be rough on a young boy. It was. And it certainly didn't give me any confidence in the institution of marriage, based on my mother's beleaguered experiences. Well, that doesn't surprise me at all. Those men treated her like dirt, and when your mother failed to conform to the subservience they were clearly expecting from her, because they imagined she could be malleably molded into what they wanted her to become. They realized they'd got her all wrong. Maybe you were worried that once you married Missy, the same thing might happen to you. I think that's exactly what I thought, Barry. When I confided in my mother and told her that Missy was laying on the pressure to get married, she was not remotely amused about it. And I think it sounded alarm bells to her. My mother has always been incredibly protective over me. I still remember our conversation over the phone. My mother was very upset, extremely disquieted.
I can't believe you're telling me this. You mean you came home from a day at work, Alex, and Missy was flicking through wedding magazines, dropping wild hints about getting married?
Pretty much, Mum. I think she's very eager for us to get married, and she's decided to stop being subtle about it, as it wasn't getting her anywhere. So she started putting the idea of marriage in my face, so to speak, and it's pretty much freaking me out.
But of course it is. Goodness gracious me. What on earth is wrong with that woman? If you had wanted to marry her, you'd have asked her a long time ago, would you not have, son? The fact that you haven't speaks volumes as far as I'm concerned.
I guess.
Well, there you go then. Don't you see, son? There is something inside you shrinking away from the very idea of getting married. It's that inner voice telling you not to do it. You need to listen to that voice, son. Pay attention to it. If I had listened to mine, I wouldn't have got 5 divorces behind my belt. I don't want you to end up like me, son. I really don't. You deserve so much better for your life. Everybody knows 1 out of 2 marriages ends in divorce. The stats make that absolutely clear. And that does not include the people that stay in their unhappy marriages, maybe for financial reasons, maybe for the children, because they just don't see a way out. So if you have any doubt, just don't do it. That's the most sound advice that I can give you, son, based on my own less than auspicious experience with relationships. Let's just say, sweetheart, if the man of my dreams went walking through my front door right now, I still would not marry him. He'd have to agree to live with me. As far as I'm concerned, things are a lot more simple that way. Because if the relationship falls apart, you can so easily walk away. You don't have to deal with prenups and God knows what else. It's an expensive business getting divorced, you know.
That's just it, Mum. I'm very happy living with Missy and the kids. I love the life we've built for ourselves. And my children are my entire world. I can't imagine living my life without them. But I don't want to marry Missy. Does that make me a bad person, Mum? I rather think it does. Marrying her would be the chivalrous, honourable thing for me to do. Most men in my position would do just that. So why on earth does the idea of getting married to Missy make me want to break out in hives and have a very bad allergic reaction? And I don't say that lightly, Mum.
And of course you're not a bad person, Alex. Where on earth did you get that absurd idea from? You're a very good person, with a very generous, kind heart. And of course you adore your children. But something is giving you a cautious approach towards marrying Missy. It probably has a whole lot to do with the setbacks I had in my own marriages that have rubbed off on you in a bad way. And that is hardly your fault, love. Do you love Missy, son? That's one crucial question you need to ask yourself, long and hard. Could you envisage spending the rest of your life with her?
But of course I love her, Mum. But I have no way of comparison. She's the only woman I've ever been with, so I don't even have the first clue what being with another woman would actually be like. How do I even know she is the one for me? I know nothing. I don't have the benefit of experience behind me, do I? It's always just been me and Missy.
Well, there you go again. Your lack of experience with women does mean you're going to be questioning your choices. That's perfectly natural. Missy's a lovely girl, of course she is. Anyone can tell you that. But you obviously don't want to commit to her. That's painfully clear to me from what you're telling me. You have to ask yourself one question, love.
Why do you feel that way? Why is there so much doubt in your mind? As I said to you again and again, listen to that voice. Well, the answer is pretty simple, Mum. I'm terrified of committing, aren't I? Maybe, as you rightly pointed out, your going through 5 divorces has scared me half to death. I'm probably worried once I've got married, everything will go pear-shaped, and there won't be a damn thing I can do about it. Maybe Missy will morph into the wife from hell. People often change when they get married. That certainly happened with the 5 men you married, Mum. I won't find it so easy to escape then, not if I've committed myself to her. I won't be able to walk away with my dignity intact. You were able to do it easily, but I'm not like you, Mum, and I hate it when things get all raw and ugly. You won't mess up like I did, Alex. You're a lot more shrewd than I ever was. You need to speak to Missy. Tell her you're happy living with her and with the children, but that you don't want to commit to marriage. Just tell her the truth, love. Tell her you love her with all your heart, but you're genuinely afraid of getting married, based on your experiences growing up. Surely she can understand that. She's a reasonable girl, is she not? Don't you get it, Mum? That's the problem. I have spoken to her about this in so many words. I told her how happy I was living with her and the children. But she seems so dead set on getting married. When she says the word marriage, all I do is want to bolt. She harps on and on about all her friends being married, how she feels as if she's been left on the shelf, how, hints like that, Mum, the whole time. It never stops. Goodness gracious me, love, that is not good. I still think you need to speak to her about your feelings again, to make it very clear where you stand. But if she won't listen to you, the way I see it is you have 2 choices. You can either marry her and be done with it, or just walk away and begin again. But I can't begin again, Mum. I have 3 children to consider, who need their father. But they also need happy parents, don't they, Alex? And believe me, if you're profoundly miserable in your relationship with Missy, your children will pick up on that straight away. That's not healthy, and it doesn't make for a happy home or a positive environment for your children to grow up in. The great news is your children are still terribly young, so if you do leave Missy at this point in time, it will cause them a great deal less hurt, because they won't remember you living at home with them, as a family, that is. I see you didn't take your mother's advice then, said Barry. You asked Missy to marry you, and a week before your due date to get married, you bolted. Pretty much. Of course, I did phone my mother to tell her what was going on, and she predictably took my side, as she always does. She didn't cast any judgment on me, which I appreciated. Where are you, Alex? She asked me. Your voice sounds so distant, so far away. I can hardly hear you. The reception is terribly bad. Mum, I'm calling you from Texas. What the hell are you doing in Texas, son? You're about to get married. You're a week away from your due date, are you not? I've left Missy, Mum. I just can't do it. I can't marry her. I left her a note. I wanted to get as far away as I could. That's why I came to Texas. I figured it would be a good place because I have no connections to this place. So it's a new beginning for me. Goodness gracious me, Alex, this is very sudden. You're freaked out about marrying Missy, aren't you? And I mean, leaving the kids for you is a big deal. This is a huge step for you to do this, son. I thought you'd committed to marrying her, but obviously you are not. Of course I'm not committed to marrying her, Mum. It was forced upon me. I just can't do it. The thought of getting married to Missy is already giving me panic attacks. I'm not worried about the kids. Much as I love them to death, I know they'll be fine with Missy. She's a devoted mother. And as you said a while back, they're still so young. They won't understand what's going on. So then this is it. It's over between you and Missy for good. I suppose so, Mum. At this point, I just can't think straight about anything. I've rented an apartment in Houston, and I'm going to look for a job for myself. I want to start afresh, Mum. I don't want you to tell Missy where she can find me. Can you do that for me? I know what she's like. She's doggedly determined. She'll come after me and persuade me to change my mind. And I just don't want her to do that. I need time to consider all my options and reflect over my feelings for her. Right now, I'm like a deer caught in headlights. I can't see the wood for the trees. Being far away from home like this, I hope will give me some clarity. Well, I won't say a word, son. I've got your back. I've always had your back. But are you absolutely sure this is what you want to do? You can always change your mind, you know. I'm not sure about anything, Mum. But I know coming to Texas was a good idea. I need a brand new start. Maybe with time to think I will change my mind, come home and finally marry Missy. But right now I need to reflect on what it is I really want from my life. And being away from Missy and the children might help me to get my head straight. Well, I think, love, you are obviously petrified of getting married by the sounds of things. You poor, poor thing. I wouldn't want to be in your space right now. Don't worry about the children. I will watch over them for you and keep you posted on how they're doing. I'll send you photographs. Well, I hoped you would say that, Mum. It goes without saying I'll send money for the children that you need to give to Missy, but you mustn't tell her it comes from me, because then she will know you are aware of where I'm living. It must be your contribution from our side of the family. You must say you're paying child support on my behalf. Do you think you can do that? I will happily do that for you, son. You know me. I'll do anything for you, as long as you're sure that you're doing the right thing. Mum, do you think I'm crazy? Of course you're not crazy, Alex. You're doing what feels right for you. I think I'm partly responsible for this dramatic saga. In fact, I know I am. So I blame myself for all of this. But you need to find yourself, son. You're confused, you're disorientated, and you really don't know what you want in life. And you have a right to find what you're looking for, love. It's your privilege to do that. This is your life, and no one can dictate to you how you live it. What do you mean, Mum, by none of this is my fault? It is my fault. I made this decision on my own. You haven't influenced me in any way. But it is my fault, son. If I had been more discerning about the men I dated and married all those years ago, I don't think the institution of marriage would have rubbed off on you so negatively, as it so obviously has done. We are all psychologically impacted by the environment upon which we've been raised, and that's perfectly understandable. We are products of our own upbringing. You saw how pitifully those men treated me back then, how desperately miserable I was, and you were more relieved than I was when I ended those relationships. It's hardly a wonder you've panicked about marrying Missy. It's got nothing to do with Missy. This is about you. And the wedding being thrust in your face like that. It's only a week away, and you feel as if you're heading for the execution chamber. I do understand your thinking, son. But believe me, many marriages do work and are very happy. But I think deep down in your subconscious, you believe your marriage is doomed, which is probably why you don't want to commit to Missy in the first place. You love the bones of the woman. You adore your 3 children that you share together. And yet you cannot make that lifelong commitment to her. The fear in you may be irrational, but it's a big deal to you, to such an extent that you've left Washington State and are now in Texas. You wouldn't have gone to all that trouble, son, unless it felt right for you. But what about Missy and the children, Mum? What about the wedding we planned? I'm really letting Missy down. She's never going to forgive me for this, and I can't blame her for that. Leave all the wedding arrangements to me. I will cancel everything. And as for Missy, son, yes, she is going to be furious, very upset, But people's sons are more resilient than you give them credit for. Missy will move on, and so will the kids. They'll be absolutely fine. I can promise you of that." "Your mother was absolutely right," Barry reflected. "I mean, let's not kid Alex. You love the bones of those kids and of Missy as well. But your mother knew you needed to find yourself, that you were lost and confused, and she was right about that. Some people spend their lifetime trying to find out who they are and what it is they want from their lives. And you weren't in a good place back then. But let's not kid. You've been financially supporting your children all these years, courtesy of your mum, and unbeknown to Missy, of course. The fact you needed to get away means you did the right thing in the first place, leaving when you did. Sometimes people need space and the solitude to reflect on what it is they want. You've lived in Texas now for 15 long years. We've started a great business together, have we not? And I think you're reasonably content. I admit you're not deliriously happy, but then again, who is really? And I know there isn't a significant other in your life, but things are good for you, are they not? But of course things are good for me, and I'm happy. But yes, I've missed Missy and the children a great deal. Sometimes I really loathe myself for what I did to them back then. It's hard to forgive myself. I occasionally wake up in a pool of sweat, feeling so guilty about what I've done. Don't you see, Barry? I've missed out not being there for my children, and that in itself really hurts me. In the end, I decided I was just a screw-up. The kids were probably better off not knowing their father. But at least my mother's been sending me photographs over the years, keeping me updated in their progress, and I can tell they're very happy with their lives. Alex, listen to me, bro. You're absolutely not a screw-up. You're one of the most reliable people I know, with your head firmly planted on your shoulders. We've all done things in our lives we're not proud of. We all have regrets. And I'm no exception to that rule either, believe it or not. Do you know what? I do understand why you were incredibly nervous about marrying Missy. It makes perfect sense to me, given how many times your mother got married. You must have thought marriage was jinxed. I'd have thought the same if I'd been wearing your shoes. I get why you bolted from your relationship with Missy. I really do. But I'm sure she's moved on with her life and done a fine job in raising those kids of yours. You said yourself, she's a very fine, accomplished woman. Of course she's a fine, accomplished woman. But I left her a week before we were supposed to get married, Barry. Do you get that? We were going to have a fine ceremony together, with over 80 people, and my mother had to cancel it all, because I just could not make the commitment. You're not the first or the last man to be afraid of marriage, bro. I'll let you into a little secret. I was terrified about marrying Patricia. I had similar misgivings. You did? I can't believe that for a second. But of course I did. I mean, getting married is a big responsibility, is it not? When you're the man of the house, you have a wife and children to be responsible for, and you don't want to fail. I was worried that I would be a dreadful husband and a hopeless father. I was afraid that someone better might come along, and Patricia would drop me like a hot pancake and go for somebody better than me, and infinitely richer. It was always a worry for me. It is for men, you know, that kind of thing. You see it all the time, don't you? Women on the lookout for someone better, someone richer, somebody more good-looking. Men aren't like that, are they? But women, well, they can easily dig the knife in very hard, and it can hurt. I've seen it all too often. My mother had an old friend that she worked with at the local hospital. His name was Charlie. He was in his 70s. A fine man he was, too. A real gentleman. But he was very lonely in his life, and so he decided to get married to a Russian mail-order bride. And so she came over to America, got her green card and the whole shenanigans. But what did she do 2 years later? She sauntered off with someone younger and richer, and he was left feeling completely broken-hearted. Well, I guess she'd never loved him, had she? She married him because she was going to get a green card. But it was different with Patricia. She would never leave you, Barry. She loves you to death. Maybe not, but I had my doubts when I first married her, bro. But I'm still married to Patricia because I love her, and it was the best thing I ever did for my life. Well, you're a braver man than I am, Barry, and I'm very glad it worked out for you. Patricia is the perfect wife for you. So you really think I should check up on my family, then? It's not what I think, bro, that counts. It's what you think. From the sounds of things, you want to see how they're doing, with your naked eye, and there is no harm in that. But if you want to remain detached from their lives and have a peek into their world, you're going to have to be very discreet and cloak and dagger about it, rather like a private investigator. You need to watch them from a distance, and once you're fully satisfied all is hunky-dory as far as they're concerned, you can return to Texas feeling lighter on your feet, knowing they're getting on swimmingly without you. I can see you need that reassurance, bro. So yes, I think you should do it. I think it might very well be life-affirming for you. In your shoes, I guess I might be tempted to do the same thing, if it gave me a measure of peace. Now that I was here, after being encouraged by my good friend Barry, I was edging my way gingerly through the woods. I was not entirely sure this mission was a good idea, but taking a shortcut through the woods behind the long line of little properties on Madison Street seemed like the best idea to get access to Tumbledown Cottage that overlooked the woodgrove and was located on the edge of the footpath. Once I reached the fringe of the grove, I took a back road so that I could easily meander through the woodgrove, where there was a plethora of tall, lofty trees, from which I could easily take cover, and hopefully clandestinely watch the comings and goings from Tumbledown Cottage, without being seen or detected. This unorthodox, rather furtive and sneaky mission I was undertaking made me feel exceedingly glad that I didn't happen to be a private detective by profession. For a start, I wouldn't have been a very good one. My guess is if you're a private detective, you're worth every single penny you earn, if this is the kind of thing you have to undertake for a living. Let's just say sneaking around is not my kind of thing. It was almost as if every lofty tree and every rambling piece of foliage growing across the forest floor was now tuning into my heartbeat, almost as if the musical instruments of nature herself were playing their own tune along with mine, so that everything was harmonious, and even my throbbing heartbeat seemed to paradoxically belong, as strange as that may sound. I was mindfully very much aware of my own extreme nervousness that was so palpable that with every step I took that brought me closer and closer and closer to Tumbledown Cottage, the heavier my breathing became. A great trepidation seized my uncertainty, rather like a firm warning hand, trying to tug me away from the woods, as if encouraging me to give up on this thankless mission. It was too late for that now, I thought. I had come all the way to Washington State from Texas. I was hardly going to give up now. It would be like running a race and never getting to the finish line. And what was the point of that? I was staying with my mother in her house, and it had been a magical reunion, as I had missed her so much, although to be fair, she visited me regularly in Houston. Nevertheless, it was great to see her again on home turf. I gather Missy had commented about the happy glow on my mother's face when she'd popped over with her 3 teenagers to see her. She was oblivious that my mother was radiating such joyful happiness because she'd seen me again. Missy had said to my mother,
"Oh my goodness, I don't believe it! You're not, are you?"
She had cupped her hands over her mouth and said,
"Hattie, you're in love again! I can see the look in your face! You've only gone and met someone. Don't tell me. It's that man you saw at bridge the other day. Is it him? Are you seeing him? Is that why you look so radiantly happy?"
"Goodness gracious me, no. Not at all. You've got the wrong end of the straw, love. The man I met at bridge is hardly my type. Besides, he's far too young for me," my mother had said, rolling her eyes in the back of her head. You forget, Missy, I was married 5 times. I'm not about to pursue any other relationships with men. Besides, I'm too old for love. Don't be ridiculous, Missy had chuckled. Nobody is too old for love. I heard of this couple that reunited with each other. They were both 80 years old, after having last been an item when they were in their 20s. Can you believe that? They reconnected after all those years and they got married. Nothing is impossible. Don't write yourself off like this, Hattie. You're an absolutely inconsolable romantic, aren't you, Missy? My mother had said. If I have a rosy glow on my face, it must be the new cream I'm using from Clarence. It's very good, you know. I strongly recommend it. Missy shook her head, pointing a finger at my mother teasingly. Don't fob me off, Hattie. Something's going on with you. You look so joyfully radiant. If a bottle of cream could make you look like that, that cosmetic house would have run out of bottles to sell by now, as everybody would want to purchase one. When my mother informed me of this unlikely conversation she'd had with Missy, I knew I had to be extremely guarded, as the last thing I wanted was for Missy to connect the dots and realize I was back in town, which was why my mother was so incredibly happy. I did often wonder how she would react to me if she saw me after all this time. Would her anger towards me have subsided after 15 years? Or was there bitterness and resentment burgeoning in her heart against me, growing wildly out of control like a rampant vine? I'd never know the answer to that question, for I had absolutely no intention of making my presence known to Missy. As far as I was concerned, I was simply passing through Washington State, like a shooting star flashing across the sky for a single second. I'd be gone from this place soon enough, once I had found the solace I was gainfully seeking, by spying on my family, as clandestinely as I could. Come hell or high water, I knew I needed to do this, to just have a fleeting glance into my children's world for a brief moment. I encouraged myself to walk further through the woods, although a reluctant, rather reticent hesitancy was trying its best to sabotage my plans. But if I returned to Texas with my tail between my legs, knowing that I could have sneaked a peek into my teenagers' lives very discreetly, but had failed to do so, I would feel like I'd returned home empty-handed. I needed to witness with my own eyes that my family was doing fine without me. Not just to hear it from my mother's reassuring words, for they were never enough. If someone, for example, told you that the Galapagos Islands are idyllic, and boast massive tortoises that wander around and live for hundreds of years, you can paint a picture of it in your head, of course you can, of a beautiful, very beguiling island. But it's only when you visit the place for yourself and see it with your own eyes that you can reassure yourself what it's really like. Let's just say other people's opinions and descriptions of a place are one thing, but they're secondary experiences, are they not? But seeing and witnessing things for yourself with your own eyes, in my opinion, makes a world of difference, which is why I was here and needed to remind myself of this fact. So I abandoned my lingering, rather persuasive doubts and proceeded further along my way, my heavy boots slamming the ground and crushing the fallen leaf litter beneath my feet. It was a very pleasant morning in late spring, with a keen, rather enthusiastic sunshine seizing the sky like a stronghold, with a brazen audacity, so that every cotton candy cloud was cast away. It would seem fleeting patches of this blue sky could be seen sneaking through the canopy of the trees above my head, casting gossamer light shadows over the leafy green foliage that gently caressed the forest floor, with an ethereal illumination, which I must admit was rather beguiling. The weather was very warm, but I wished I had worn long sleeves, as I had been bitten by a collection of mosquitoes and scratched my arms against some rambling thorny foliage. The binoculars I was wearing were casually flung over my neck, and as I walked they bounced against my chest and were extremely uncomfortable. I really wasn't cut out to do all this snooping around. I discreetly, if not rather apprehensively, made my way down a crooked, rather higgledy-piggledy footpath through the trees, hoping with all my heart I would not stumble across a rambler that might just remember me from all those years back, which was always a possibility. And if I did, would they even recognize me after so long? I couldn't be sure. In 15 long years, the trees in these woods had grown exponentially. The woods were barely recognizable, and many of the familiar paths were not so familiar anymore. There was a lot of accelerated plant growth, rendering the woodgrove completely different to the woods I'd once remembered. It was in this sprawling collection of trees that I had walked our family mixed-breed dog Pep down these undulating trails, and Pep had adored these woods. I used to walk him every single morning, and I always allowed him to run off leash, chasing everything that moved, from rabbits to squirrels, and Pep really had the time of his life in here. I wondered if old Mrs. Beacon was still around. I expect the 2 schnauzers she'd lovingly owned back then had now long since passed away. Had she got herself another dog? A couple more schnauzers, perhaps. I did know she was extremely besotted by the breed, and would say, "Alex, let me tell you, once you've owned a schnauzer, you wouldn't want any other kind of dog. The breed is just so intelligent." I half expected to see her walking down the footpath, giving me a cheery smile like old times, and saying, "Hello there, Alex. Oh, it's lovely running into you again. Tell me, how is Pep doing today?" I would chuckle and say, "You can see for yourself, Mrs. Beacon. He's having the time of his life chasing all the rabbits. It's the rabbits I feel sorry for. No time to rest with Pep around." "So I see. But don't you worry, Alex. I assure you, if you think Pep is giving you a hard time, you haven't seen anything yet. My schnauzers are so mischievous. They get their noses into absolutely everything. Topsy and Turvy had their noses in the shopping bags the other day. I couldn't figure out where the steak had got to. I found the empty packet behind a bush in my yard. So the 2 of them had gone off and gobbled the steak up without my even knowing it. That's what they're like, but I love them all the same." Topsy and Turvy, her 2 schnauzers, were always delighted to see Pep. They would be chasing each other around with tails wagging rigorously, and they would occasionally yap. Mrs. Beacon would no doubt have heard that I'd left Missy all those years ago. She would have been very disappointed in me. She was an ethical, principled, rather stout-hearted woman, with staunch old-fashioned values and very strong Christian beliefs. So I guess she had a dim view of a man like myself, leaving his children like I did. And of course she wouldn't be wrong about that. In the circumstances, I sincerely hoped I wouldn't run into anyone that might potentially recognize me. I wouldn't want word getting back to Missy that I had been spotted on the Silver Gorge Trail, looking rather furtive, as if I was up to no good. Indeed, I hoped no one would disturb me in the woodgrove, as I went about clandestinely spying on my family. Even I had to admit to myself that the way I was creeping around the woods made me look conspicuously suspicious. Thankfully, the woods seemed agreeably quiet, apart from the prepossessing trills of the birdsong that was so incredibly upbeat and very cheerful, it uplifted my spirits significantly. I had changed a great deal over the years, as we all do, my hazel brown hair a great deal thinner. It was greying at the temples. My skin had become badly weathered from the Texas sun, and there were conspicuous crow's feet around my eyes, which my mother assured me made me look mellow and self-assured, as if I'd grown into myself and was more comfortable in my skin. And I think that was true. I was reticently sashaying down the footpath that bordered the divide between the backyard of Tumbledown Cottage. This was fenced in from the woods by a traditional wooden pole-style fence that I conveniently used to climb under with Pep to take regular shortcuts into the woods. on the left-hand side of Tumbledown Cottage, was the public footpath, covered in a plethora of white pebbles that you could access from the pavement. It ran in an upward trajectory over a hilly, rather rocky slope, until you invariably found yourself walking through a higgledy-piggledy tumble of tall, lofty trees, where you would soon encounter the sign Silver Gorge Trail straight ahead. And then further along, there were 2 more trails you could potentially take. Anyone in the local community, or outsiders alike, with an eye for adventure, could easily access one of these trails. If you were looking for a burdensome, audacious walk that required a great deal of uphill challenges and walking over some taxing, rocky terrain, you could, of course, take the Highland Trail, which was the most venturesome trail of all, and well worth your while to explore, for there you would encounter waterfalls and rock pools, and likely spot some interesting indigenous wildlife. I cautiously positioned myself behind a tree, overlooking Tumbledown Cottage, where I could get an excellent view on the backyard and the wraparound porch from here. I knew I would be able to detect my family without being physically seen. That is, of course, if they actually ventured into the backyard. I hadn't, in hindsight, given this matter much thought. Teenagers these days were notorious for spending countless hours behind the computer. As I stood there on the edge of the footpath, I slipped clandestinely behind a couple of trees to take cover, with my binoculars steadily pinned on Tumbledown Cottage. I had the overwhelming sense that I was not alone, and that something was watching me. I wondered if my anxiousness was deceiving me, and giving me a fear that had no relationship with reality whatsoever. That must be it. I knew that my hot-headed, impetuous imagination could be a powerful deceiver. I could not allow myself to indulge in such irrational thoughts, because that would defeat the purpose of my being here. I had come here today on a purposeful mission, and that was to watch the comings and goings of Tumbledown Cottage. I wasn't going to be scared away. Let's not kid. Woods at the very best of times can be insufferably intimidating. How many times had I walked in this woodgrove myself over the years? But never once, I have to admit, had I ever felt as disquieted as I did now. I was being silly. Of course I was. No one was there. What was I like? Perhaps coming back to my old home after all these years, and viewing it from a distance, had churned up in me an emotional kaleidoscope of self-recrimination. That must be it. In a trice the woodgrove became disturbingly quiet, airily so. Even the trills of the birds' song became mute. But this malignant phenomenon did not concern me too much, as I pinned my binoculars on Tumbledown Cottage and focused on the job at hand, abandoning all troubling thoughts. My binoculars wobbled rather precariously in my hands, and I almost dropped them on the forest floor when I saw Missy for the first time in 15 long years. Seeing her again made my heart begin to flap wildly in my chest. She was carrying a plastic basket in her hands and walked towards the washing line. Missy never believed in using spin dryers, if you could help it. She began to hang the washing out. She was wearing a pretty white summer frock, covered in a whimsical array of yellow flowers, with a narrow belt around her waist, along with a matching cardigan. She looked as pretty and beguiling as a sunflower. I observed a little impish boy at her side. He was following her around as she pegged down the washing. He must have been no more than 6 or 7 years old. He was carrying a toy aeroplane in his hands, which he waved around. At one stage he pointed to the woods, and Missy was shaking her head vigorously. I suspect he was asking her if he could go and play in the woods with his aeroplane, and she was saying, "No, you cannot." It is rather amazing what you can glean from body language. You can certainly learn a lot. Who was the little boy, I wondered? My mother assured me that Missy only had our 3 children. They were all mine. They were now teenagers. So where did this little boy fit into the equation? Who was he? Why were my children not physically around? Were they all indoors playing on the computer, I wondered. I suddenly remembered my mother informing me that Missy's sister Gina had a 7-year-old child, a boy, I believe. My mother told me he was always getting up to all kinds of chicanery. That little kid's name is Lucas. He's an absolute nightmare, believe me. He's always getting up to so much mischief. He's a rogue if I ever saw one. You can't turn your back on him for a second, she told me. Maybe Missy was babysitting her nephew for Gina. That would make perfect sense. I steadily focused my binoculars on Missy, inhaling deeply as I did so. I was almost nervous to study her in detail for too long. She was as beautiful as I had remembered her to be, with her chestnut locks tumbling elegantly down her shoulders. I expected close up she probably had gained a few lines around her eyes like I had done. I realized in that moment how much I missed this wonderful woman. I had been such a fool to leave her, and my folly had become so brazenly apparent to me. But it was too late. Life is not like your grandmother's knitting. You can't go back to the very beginning, when you've dropped a few stitches to start again. All of a sudden I felt this vaporous breath on the back of my neck. It smelt strongly of wild garlic. But when I turned around to look behind me, nothing was there. But I absolutely knew someone had breathed on me. But who? It was an airy, rather unsettling feeling that made my blood run icy cold, most especially as I could see no one was there. But I knew with all my heart, without a shadow of doubt, someone had come up to me and breathed on my neck. But how could they have disappeared so quickly? I reasoned only a ghost could do this, but I had never believed in such things before. Was I losing my mind? I was more bemused than afraid, but I could sense someone was there, and they were watching me. "Hello!" I called out. "Is anybody there? Is anybody there? I know someone is there. Now quit playing games with me. This isn't funny. I smelt the garlic on your breath." I waited for a response, but none came. Several minutes later I heard a whistle, and I looked up to see a tall, dark, shadowy figure just standing there, staring at me through dark, treacle-coloured eyes, and nonchalantly whistling some kind of tune under its breath. The creature continued to stare at me. Was this actually happening to me? I closed my eyes willfully, to be absolutely certain I was not dreaming. But when I opened them ever so slowly, I could see the creature was still standing there, staring at me. This time I knew my eyes were not deceiving me, and I was not dreaming. I was staring at a male Bigfoot. My heart was leaping around in my chest, and I was trembling, as if in this moment an adrenal response within me was taking charge and urging me to run away as fast as I could from this formidably imposing creature who had made himself clearly known to me. Instead, I stood there like a prize lemon, staring open-mouthed at the strapping male Bigfoot. Dare I say, the creature seemed to be rather enjoying my reaction in seeing him, as if he got some kind of warped pleasure from my shock. I heard a voice in my head saying, "Yes, I'm real, and no, it's not a dream. You're the only person I've shown myself to, apart from the old lady with the 2 dogs, who fled in terror when she saw me. But I haven't seen her since. Never been back to the woods again after she saw me. I think she thought I would eat her up. I get it. I look a bit ferocious at times, but I never meant anyone harm." Had the creature really spoken to me in my head like this? Or was I actually losing it, I wondered. I had to be losing it. "Yes, it was me speaking to you. No, this is not a dream. And yes, I am real. Let's just say, as a matter of principle, I never show myself to your kind. But you got my undivided attention when you started snooping around the wood grove. I wanted to investigate what you were up to. But I see you mean no harm now, so I feel reasonably reassured by you. I just don't take kindly to furtive behaviour in the woods, unless there is a good reason for it. But I see your energy is kind and compassionate, so I won't bother you any more." The Bigfoot was communicating with me telepathically, and I could hardly believe it. He was robustly built in every sense of the word, standing up proudly on two powerful tree-trunk-sized legs. He was covered in long flowing dark hair that gave off a bluish hue. His skin was distinctly grey, his cheekbones high, his face human. I should have felt fear, but because of the exchange between us, he had calmed down the inner turmoil in my mind. The Bigfoot's eyes were quizzically studying me, like one of those detectives you see in the airport, checking to see if you're not hiding anything illegal on your person. It would seem this rather outlandish creature was reading me like a book, checking to see that I was not loitering around the grove for nefarious purposes. I think he seemed reasonably satisfied that I was harmless enough. I heard him say in my head, "Well, I better be going. Oh, by the way, if you do happen to see the old lady with the 2 dogs, who I saw many years ago, tell her I meant her no harm, and that she's welcome to walk freely in these woods again, and I will never bother her." I suddenly felt a degree of disappointment that the Bigfoot was leaving, but I was powerless to stop him. After the Bigfoot had disappeared into the woodgrove, moments later I realized that someone was tugging on my shirt. I looked down to see the little boy who had been with Missy by the washing line at Tumbledown Cottage. He was looking into my eyes. What was he doing here, I wondered? I was sure Missy had instructed him firmly not to go near the woods, but here he was staring up at me with an inquisitive look on his face, and in his hand he was carrying a model aeroplane, which he was waving around proudly, as if showing off.
"Who are you?"
he asked me curiously. "My name is Alex, and who are you?" I said, fixing my gaze on the young boy.
"My name is Lucas. Lucas Piper Barrel."
"Well, it's a long surname, isn't it?" I said, knowing full well that Lucas must be Missy's sister's child, as Gina's surname was indeed Piper Barrel. "Are you not supposed to be at home? What are you doing here in the woods?" I asked him. "Have you got permission to play here? I'm quite sure your aunt wouldn't be happy if she knew you were sneaking around in the woodgrove." The boy grinned at me cheekily.
"She doesn't even know I'm here."
"But I don't think she'll be pleased if she did, because she'll be worried if she can't find you. She'll wonder where you are." The young boy considered my words.
"She doesn't care where I am. She's always so busy. She won't let me have any fun. Don't tell her I was here. She'll be very cross with me. Nobody wants to play with me. My cousins are too old to play with me. All they do is play computer games all the time. They're so boring. Do you want me to show you my model aeroplane? My father gave it to me for my birthday. I turned 6 a week ago, on the 2nd of May.
"Happy birthday," I said. "Well, why don't you show me your model aeroplane? And then you must go back to your cottage, and I won't tell anyone I saw you. It'll be our secret." The boy handed me his aeroplane to inspect, and began to go into lengthy detail about the model. He seemed to know a lot about it, but then he became disquieted when he heard Missy's voice. "Lucas! Lucas! Lucas, where are you?"
"It's my aunt,"
he said, looking affrighted.
"Oh no, she's looking for me. She knows I'm in here. She's going to be so cross with me. I'm going to get into so much trouble."
I could hear Missy calling Lucas.
"Lucas, I know you're in the woods. I saw you going in there. Now you come out right now. I have had enough of your bad behaviour. Get back here now."
And before the boy had a chance to scramble away and hide, Missy had seen the both of us. She was staring incredulously from me to Lucas, and the first thing she said when she saw me was,
"Alex, is that really you? Oh my God, it is!"
She cupped her hands over her mouth in astonishment. "What on earth are you doing here?" Her eyes fell onto my binoculars, and then back again to my face. We stared at each other for a while, as if we were both in shock, and then we embraced, and she began to cry on my shoulders.
Why? Why, Alex? Why? I don't understand.
I don't know, I said, because I knew exactly what she was referring to. I guess I was scared of commitment. I was an idiot, Missy, because it's you that I've only ever loved, and I'm realizing that now. She pulled away for a brief moment and stared up at me with wide eyes.
But I still don't understand. Why didn't you tell me you were so spooked about us getting married? I'm not a monster, you know. I would have understood if you'd explained things properly. You never gave me the chance, did you?
I couldn't do it to you, Missy. I couldn't break your heart and tell you I didn't want to get married. I felt pushed into a corner. I'm so sorry I let you down. I'm so sorry I caused you so much hurt. I really regret it. I do not know how long we embraced, but the moment we spent together in the wood grove was magical. It almost took my breath away. And what startled me the most was there was no anger or resentment or even bitterness in Missy's heart. She really was an incredible woman.
You two know each other then, said little Lucas.
We sure do, Lucas, Missy chuckled. I've known this man a very long time. She took my hand in hers and led me back to the cottage, where I would meet my teenage children for the first time in 15 years.
Missy's account. My life in 15 years since my fiancé Alex had abandoned me had not been easy, as being a single mother never is. I had been forced to raise 3 children all on my own, but thankfully my fiancé's mother Hattie had faithfully given me both emotional and financial support, which was invaluable to me. My children had grown up into well-rounded teenagers. Sandra was 16, Murray was 17 and a half, and Hugh was 19. I was exceedingly proud of them all, but only sad that they had not had the benefit of growing up knowing their father. It was difficult to have to share with them that I didn't know where their father was, although I believed he was very much alive and well, living somewhere in North America. But where was the $100,000 question?
Why doesn't Daddy want to be with us?
I was asked over and over again by my children.
It's got nothing to do with you,
I would promise them.
I know he loved the bones of you all, and he still does, I'm sure. I was the problem. I think he didn't love me enough to stay with me. It had nothing to do with you, I told them.
But why?
They would ask me.
Well, I'm quite sure you have friends at your school who have divorced parents living separate lives, don't you?
My children would consider this and nod, and I would explain that sometimes adults chose to live apart, and that is what had happened with me and their father.
But why doesn't he want to come and see us?
They would ask me.
We're his children.
But I'm sure he wants to see you, I would tell them. But I guess he has his good reason for staying away. People are complicated, you know. But I promise you, when the time is right for him, I'm sure he'll come looking for you. I had raised all 3 of my children devotedly at Tumbledown Cottage. They had given my life both purpose and meaning. I had been mortified when a week before my wedding I'd received a note from my fiancé Alex, telling me he couldn't do this, he couldn't get married to me. He gave me no reason or explanation as to why he'd suddenly got cold feet about getting married. It seemed nonsensical to me, as I believed we were very much in love. How could I have got that so hopelessly wrong? We had been with each other since we were 18 years old, and we had been so committed, and yet a week before we were due to get married, he literally ran away. I felt as if someone had thrown a bucket of ice-cold water over my head. There was no doubt in my mind that he had callously dumped me and, of course, the children. How could he do this to us? It had made no sense to me at all. Alex was one of the kindest, most considerate men I'd ever known. So his incongruous behaviour was so out of character for him. I was completely gutted, as it was the most natural thing for us with 3 children to get married, I thought. I mean, isn't that what most people do when they're in a committed relationship and when they both love each other like we did? I was incensed with Alex for abandoning me a week before our wedding.
If he was so cowardice and too afraid to tie the knot with me, why wouldn't he just talk to me about the matter instead of humiliating me like he'd done? Now I would have to cancel the wedding and tell my friends it was off. I dreaded hearing the pity in their voices, as the last thing I wanted was for people to feel sorry for me. I had no idea where Alex was, and if I could have located his whereabouts, I would have tried to find him and knock some common sense into him. I would have persuaded him that leaving our children was a monumental mistake. It was fair enough if he didn't want to marry me. I could accept that. But if he loved me, why couldn't we carry on like we'd done before? I felt grievously upset, very disenchanted, and when I told my fiancé's mother, Hattie, what Alex had done, my news did not appear to surprise her in the least. I almost felt like she was co-conspirator with Alex, and I was pretty certain she knew exactly where he was, for she was not remotely overwrought by his absurd absence. By all accounts, any parent would naturally be beside themselves with worry if their own child did a disappearing act, especially a week before their wedding day. But Hattie remained oddly composed and very stoic about the whole thing, taking the news about Alex's disappearance in her stride. "I think Alex has left me," I told her one day on the phone. "He's left a note, can you believe that? Telling me he can't do this, he can't get married. I think he's dumped me, Hattie. And the children as well. What am I going to do? The wedding's all been booked, and he leaves me like this a week before our wedding day. Why would he do this to me?"
Don't worry, love. I'm sure it's not personal. If Alex has left you, this is more about him than about you. In time, I'm sure he'll come to his senses and return home. I guess he just needs some time to think. I know he loves you, dear, and of course the children, but Alex has issues.
"You think it's all right, Hattie, for him to leave me like this in the lurch a week before my wedding day? I'm sorry, but that's not normal behaviour. It's very strange for Alex to do this. And you seem so nonchalant about it. And what do you mean he has issues? What issues are you talking about?" There was a somewhat awkward, uncomfortable silence at the end of the telephone, and then Hattie said,
"Well, I was saying it's probably about me rather than you as far as Alex is concerned."
"What do you mean this is about you, Hattie? Goodness gracious, I wish you'd stop talking in riddles like this. I'm trying to make sense as to why my fiancé has swanned off a week before our wedding, and you're not making any sense at all."
Look, I don't know how to explain this to you, Missy. I think that Alex has been scared off getting married.
"But why? I don't understand. He proposed to me, did he not?"
I told you, love, again and again that this is not about you. You must stop taking things so personally. It has a lot to do with me. I have 5 failed marriages behind me, and they were a source of great anguish for Alex. You must remember at the time Alex was a young, impressionable boy. Seeing me go through such a tumultuous challenge with 5 divorces behind me, it was very disquieting for him, was it not?
"What exactly are you saying, Hattie? Why don't you just spell it out for me, for goodness sake?"
Well, I don't know how to put it to you eloquently, Missy. But you see, the men I married were rather abusive towards me. Not physically, of course, but they treated me rather badly. And Alex saw it, you know. They were rather misogynistic towards me. You do know what that means, don't you, Missy?
"You mean a misogynist? Of course I know what a misogynist is. Men who hate women and feel women are inferior to them."
That's exactly right, Missy. I have no idea why I drew such demeaning men into my life, but I did. All my marriages were exactly the same. Every time I got married, it was Groundhog Day being played out over and over again. I remember Alex saying to me,
"Why do you marry these men, Mum? None of them make you happy. They're all horrible."
When I stopped getting on the marriage treadmill, life became incredibly good for the both of us. We were terribly happy, and I never got married again. And I think somewhere deep down in the recesses of Alex's mind, he thinks that all marriages are invariably doomed to disaster, I suppose, based on his own childhood experiences. In short, I guess you could say, Alex thinks all marriages are jinxed.
Well, I had no idea, Hattie. Why didn't he tell me all this? I feel so angry with him for not communicating with me. I'm not a mind reader, you know. How am I expected to know he feels like this if he doesn't tell me?
But maybe he did tell you, love. But maybe you weren't listening properly. From what I gleaned, you were the one eager to get married. He was telling me how you were shoving wedding magazines down his nose and complaining tirelessly that you didn't want to become an old maid. You were piling on the pressure, love, with the greatest of respect.
Well, maybe I was, Hattie, but what's wrong with that? We had 3 children together, for goodness sake. Everybody was asking me, when is Alex going to pop the question and make an honest woman out of you? All my friends were getting married, Hattie, and Alex and I were just living together. I wanted more. I needed a commitment from him. Is that so wrong of me?
Of course it's not wrong, love. I mean, I was your age once, and I know how excited I was when I got married to Alex's father. I thought our relationship would last forever, and that we were for keeps, but it wasn't to be. I felt the same way as you do when I was your age. I know how important it is to settle down and have children and get married. But Alex, well, I don't know if he's the settling down type.
So he runs away from me, is that it, Hattie? Like a frightened rabbit being chased by a fox. It's pathetic, and it's ridiculous. I love Alex, and I know he loves me, Hattie. So why didn't he talk to me about all this? If he was so traumatized about getting married, we could have discussed all this. But no, he just bogs off into the sunset, doesn't he, without a bye or leave. And I hardly think that that is remotely fair.
I don't think, love, things are as clear-cut as they always seem. If you want my salient advice, just give Alex time. I'm sure he will come to his senses sooner or later. Before you know it, he'll be back with you and the children. Sometimes people just need space. Don't worry about anything. I'll help you financially with the children, and with the babysitting and anything else you might need.
Thanks, Hattie. I do appreciate that. But if you do know where Alex is, please tell him I really love him, that all is forgiven and forgotten, and I want him home. That's all that matters. I don't care about us getting married. I just want him home.
I told you, Missy, I have no idea where Alex is, but I'm sure he'll be in touch in due course.
I knew in my gut Hattie was lying, of course. She knew exactly where Alex was. But I imagine Alex had told her to keep his whereabouts secret. Had my own children asked the same of me, I would have kept their secret. So how could I blame Hattie for being protective towards Alex? But it was incredibly frustrating for me. I really needed to talk to him, and a lack of communication meant that there was no resolution for us. It also meant my children would potentially grow up without a father, and I really didn't want that to happen for them. Life can be so terribly cruel at times. I had considered hiring a private investigator to find Alex's whereabouts, but then again I thought better of it. What was the point? If Alex wanted no part of our lives, then I should just leave him be. Maybe he didn't deserve us anyway. I guess I went through a grieving process about Alex, as if he'd been killed in a tragic car accident. It really was like I was mourning the death of our relationship. So invariably I went through all the cycles of frustration, grief, sorrow, anguish, anger and denial, and then of course acceptance. Then after that I moved on with my life. I was resolutely determined to be happy, whether Alex was in my life or not. It would seem years went by at the speed of light, and every year I would secretly hope that Alex would make an appearance in our lives again. But he never would come back. I soon realized that. I had a friend who was a counsellor, and I confided in her about the matter. She affirmed that there were indeed people out there, petrified of getting married. It can be a real condition, she told me, just like agoraphobia. For such people, making a commitment is like a prison sentence to them. So there was nothing I could do but pray that one day God would bring Alex home to me, and the children, when of course the time was right. It would all be in God's hands. Hattie had actively encouraged me to date other men, which coming from her was not easy to hear. It meant to me that she believed that Alex had seriously moved on with his life, that I should do the same, and that he clearly wanted no part of me or the children, and that really, really hurt.
Look, love, as I told you from the very beginning, it has never been about you, as far as Alex is concerned, and I genuinely believe he has always loved you, and I'm sure he still does wherever he is. But it's obvious to me, love, that he's not coming back, so don't wait for him. You deserve to be happy. Go out there, meet other men, and if you get married, I'm sure Alex will be very happy for you.
I did, of course, date other men, but the relationships always fell apart because I was still so in love with Alex. In the end, I decided to remain footloose and fancy-free, and if it meant being a spinster for the rest of my life, then so be it. After Alex left me, I developed a close relationship with a wonderful woman called Mrs. Beacon. She lived on Madison Avenue, about 3 doors down at a cottage called the Bridges. She was the proud owner of 2 schnauzers, who were very good friends with our mixed-breed dog Pep. We would often walk our dogs together in the woods. Sometimes Mrs. Beacon would pick up Pep, as there were, of course, occasions for me that with 3 rambunctious children on my hands, I was far too busy to attend to my dog. Mrs. Beacon was glad to help me out when she could in that regard. When Alex had been living with me, he used to be the one that took Pep for his regular walks. But now this was a responsibility he had thrust on my plate. At the time Alex abandoned me, Mrs. Beacon, hearing the sobering news, came to see me about the matter, for she was very disquieted that Alex had walked out of our lives without so much as a bye or leave. I hasten to say she soon became a much-loved maternal figure in my own life.
"Is it true?" she had asked me. "Word around the close is that Alex has left you, my dear. And the kids, of course, only a week before your wedding day. I'm so desperately sorry to hear the news. I just don't know what to say, my dear. It's all too dreadful for words. Alex didn't strike me as the kind of man that would renege on his responsibilities. But it just goes to show you, you can't always know someone fully, can you?"
"I'm afraid it happens," I said, secretly hoping at the time that Mrs. Beacon would leave me well alone. I didn't want to talk about Alex, and people's sympathy was only making things a whole lot worse for me.
"Can I come in, dear? I know it's rude to invite myself, but I'd love to have a cup of coffee with you if I may."
I had felt a tad annoyed inviting Mrs. Beacon into my house, but how could I refuse a considerate woman? I cordially invited her in, not knowing that this would be the beginning of a great friendship between us. I always called her Mrs. Beacon, even though her first name was Georgina. Somehow she suited being called Mrs. Beacon, as she was a woman that naturally demanded great respect. Alex had also called her Mrs. Beacon. Alex had always referred to Mrs. Beacon as the old lady, but in my opinion, a woman in her 70s is still reasonably young, especially today. But in Alex's mind, if you were a day over 50, you were already in the old camp. Mrs. Beacon was remarkably fit. She would have given a 40-year-old blue-collar worker a run for their money. I expect her regular daily walking up the Silver Gorge Trail into the woods would likely keep anyone in excellent shape. Mrs. Beacon was well upholstered, you could say, but not remotely fat. She had a radiant glow to her complexion, and a graceful elegance to her gait when she walked. Her grey hair hung around her face in a flattering layered short crop of natural curls, which I always suspected looked good even after a night's sleep. It was one of those very manageable hairstyles. I noticed her fine skin was heavily lined, but her grey eyes were so full of spirited life, and in certain lights her eyes would change colour into a full spectrum of blues that was really pretty. Mrs. Beacon had sat down at a chair at my large wooden kitchen table, while the bright red kettle whistled away merrily on the gas hob of my range oven. I bustled around preparing coffee, which I served up with some of my homemade oatmeal and raisin cookies. My children were at school at the time, so it was only Pep in the house with me, who was absolutely delighted to see Mrs. Beacon, as he encountered her regularly during his walks in the woods with her 2 Schnauzer dogs. Mrs. Beacon took the coffee from me eagerly, warming her hands over the mug.
"Thanks, dear. This is very kind of you. I know what it's like, dear, when your fiancé abandons you. My Dickon did much the same to me, I'm afraid. It was my wedding day, you know, and I walked down the aisle when he was waiting for me, with his best man at his side. They were both dressed to the nines in smart dinner suits, they were. I thought it was going to be the very best day of my life, but how wrong I was about that. If I'd known what would happen, I probably wouldn't have got out of bed that morning, I'm afraid."
"Are you saying that something bad happened on your wedding day, Mrs. Beacon?" I asked.
"Well, you could say that. That's a fine way to put it. Like any bride, you know, I was looking forward to my big day. And dare I say it, I don't think I'd ever looked more beautiful, wearing that wedding dress that was covered in pearls. I've since learnt that pearls mean tears, and in my case, that certainly applied. I was walking down the aisle, as I was saying, with our special song being played. It was all so magical. All of a sudden, Dickon excused himself, and I never ever saw him again. I'd never been so humiliated in all my life, being rejected by my own fiancé, who seemed so devoted to me, in front of over 80 guests. Well, it wasn't an easy pill to swallow, let me tell you. I remember the pastor told everyone in the congregation to go home, and that the wedding party was cancelled, as there would be nothing to celebrate. It was probably the saddest day of my entire life. Let's just say I don't remember a time I felt more rejected."
"Oh, I'm sorry, Mrs. Beacon. That's terrible," I said.
"Well, it was terrible. My parents were furious, as you can imagine, with Dickon, and my father wanted to kill him, but the less said about that, the better. I have never seen my father look mad like he did that day. I think his words were, 'If I ever lay my eyes on that nasty little weasel again, I'll tear him apart limb from limb with my own hands, and I'll wring his neck until he's begging for mercy. How dare he do this to our Georgina?' My mother was naturally very angry, while both of Dickon's parents apologized profusely for their son's unorthodox behavior."
"But why do you think Dickon did that to you, Mrs. Beacon? I mean, it's very strange to do that in the middle of a marriage service when everybody is watching."
"Well, it sure is. His mother couldn't even understand it. But she did say she think he must have got an attack of cold feet. I know after the event my parents wrapped me up in cotton wool. It was a tumultuous period in my life. They kept reassuring me there was nothing wrong with me. It was Dickon that had the problem. I think in that moment I decided I would never ever get married, and I never did."
"You are joking. It's terrible, Mrs. Beacon, absolutely terrible. To think that I was feeling sorry for myself that my fiancé abandoned me a week before my wedding day. But what happened to you was 1,000 times worse. You were walking down the aisle, for goodness sake, and then your fiancé abandoned you in front of 80 people. That has got to be so destroying. But your parents were right. It wasn't anything to do with you. I'm sure the problem rested with your fiancé. Maybe he and Alex had a lot in common in that regard. They both seem to have got cold feet. Perhaps they thought getting married would make them feel trapped or something. That's what I'm inclined to think."
"It was an extremely tough time, love. That is certainly the case. But when I heard your news, it was confounding to me. I really felt for you, because I knew exactly what you were going through. In my case, it was incredibly humiliating. I was 22 at the time, madly in love with Dickon I was, as he was with me, so I assumed. I couldn't imagine anything better than spending the rest of my life with him. The wedding was planned at an exclusive venue, where 100 people were invited, but 80 people accepted the invite. My fiancé was standing there at the aisle, looking so handsome. and as I walked down the carpet with the beautiful music playing, he panicked and just ran off. I just remember when he looked up at me, his face just drained of all colour. His eyes grew wide. He bolted like a frightened dog. I gather he went to his mother's place, picked up all his stuff, and was gone. For many months, I believe. No one heard a single peep out of him. I understand he started a brand new life for himself in Maine, and his mother told me he was doing very well. He did send me a card in the post saying he was very sorry. I think at the wedding, when he slunk away as I was walking down the aisle, everyone assumed he'd gone to the toilet very quickly, that he'd had an attack of a bad stomach or something. I assumed the same. The pastor said, "I'm afraid the groom needs a moment. Let's play some more music, shall we? I'm sure he won't be long." You could hear the bemused whispers among the congregation, as everybody picked up at once that something was rather off. I thought my fiancé was throwing up in the toilet, having drunk too much the night before, which I know he'd done. I was a tad annoyed with him, I will admit that. But I waited patiently for him to return, but he never came back. One of his best men saw him getting into his car and driving away. I never saw him again, but I since learned he shacked up with a man, so I guess I did have a lucky escape in the end. All this time I thought it was about me, but it turned out he was in the closet. I'd never have believed there was a gay bone in his entire body. It just shows you how easy it is to be deceived and misled by someone.
So you never ever saw him again? I think he should have told you the truth, even when he wrote to apologise to you. It was really mean and self-centred of him, keeping you in the dark like this. It's so much better to be honest, isn't it? If he had admitted to you he was gay, you'd have perhaps found it easier to forgive him. All I can say is it's a very good job he never married you. Maybe he could not do it because at the end of the day he had too much respect for you and didn't want to dishonour you.
You took the words right out of my mouth, dear. In hindsight, when I reflect over it all, I think much the same as you. I believe when I was walking down the aisle and Dickens saw me, he was hit with an attack of the guilts, when he realised it would be extremely dishonest to marry me, if he knew he was attracted to men and not women. Back in my day, people were not forthcoming about being gay, you see. It was very much frowned upon. So if you were that way inclined, you usually kept your sexual orientation a dirty, rather dark secret. I believe a lot of people were married to gay men, and probably never ever knew it. That's why I came to see you today, love. I wanted you to know that you are not alone. I've worn your shoes before, as have many women like myself.
I know. We're not alone, are we? There are other people like us.
Of course they are. You see, when Dickon abandoned me, I did feel so dreadfully alone, as if I was the only woman in the world that had been publicly humiliated on my wedding day. But I think being abandoned a week before your wedding, as you have been, is also very distressing, especially when you have to let everyone that you've invited to your wedding know that the wedding is off. That is not easy. You know what people are like. People in the close have been gossiping about what happened between you and Alex. But I want you to know that that happened to me as well. I couldn't walk anywhere in town without people whispering about me. It was very disconcerting. I shared my story with you today because I wanted you to know that you can talk to me about your feelings. Because if anyone can understand what you're going through, it's almost certainly me.
I'm so sorry, Mrs. Beacon, I said. It's so dreadfully sad Dickon did that to you. I can understand why you're scared off getting married again. I think the same thing has happened to me. The very idea of getting married now has almost certainly lost its rosy glow.
Well, I'm sure things will change for you, dear. It won't always be like that. You'll bounce back from this, I'm sure you will. I never married again because I never met anyone like Dickon. I really loved that man, and I still hold a flame for him today in my heart, even after he deserted me like that. I know what you're thinking. It's pathetic, and you're right about that. But I can't help myself. What can I say? More fool me.
So you haven't regretted that you never got married again, Mrs. Beacon?
Oh, heavens, no. I've been on my own for many years, dear. And I have 2 schnauzers living with me, so I never feel alone. I've been extremely happy. It's in your case that I'm surprised that Alex left you in the lurch like that. As I was saying, I'd have not put him down as the type to behave like this. I would regularly stop and talk to him in the wood grove. He was always so friendly to me, so amenable. He would be walking Pep, of course. He would go on and on about you and the children to me. And he was the last person I would have ever imagined would abandon you and the kids. When I heard the atrocious news, I was completely flabbergasted by the whole wretched business. Your Alex looks so contented in his life with you. So for him to do this, it's unfathomable. But having said that, I felt much the same about Dickon. Some men, I guess, are just difficult to understand. They lightly feel the same about us, you know. As they say, men are from Mars and women are from Venus.
Well, I can assure you Alex is definitely not gay. But I suspect he's got big issues somewhere down the line when it comes to marriage.
How so, dear, if you don't mind my asking?
Well, you know his mother married 5 misogynists, one after another. They treated her like a doormat. And his mother absolutely believes that the negative consequences of these abusive marital relationships had long-lasting repercussions on Alex.
You mean he was too frightened to marry you, in case history repeated itself again?
Asked Mrs. Beacon, puckering her eyebrows together in a perplexed expression. Pretty much, I said.
Well, I suppose that makes sense. I can see how someone can be scared off getting married, based on their childhood experiences. Whether we like it or not, we're all products of our upbringing and the environment upon which we've been raised. I heard of 3 triplets once, all separated at birth, raised by 3 different parents, and adopted by them as well. One came from a family who were all fitness freaks, where being fit and playing sport was a top priority for them. The other twin was brought up in an incredibly academic family. And the third twin came from a family where they pretty much did nothing all day but lazed around and lived off state benefits. I don't believe they even tried to look for work. One twin became a fitness coach, as he'd come from an incredibly fit family. The other was raised in academia, so became a college professor. The final twin, raised by a couple of couch potatoes, sat around all day watching television and eating bowls of Cheerios. The study proved that we rarely become like our environment upon which we have been raised.
Well, that's very interesting, isn't it? Maybe that's why Alex is so terrified of marriage. It would make sense. Before long, I'm delighted to say that Mrs. Beacon became a much-loved fixture and fitting in me and my children's lives. I would regularly invite her over to dinner to enjoy a Sunday night roast with us. My children loved her, and she even had a key to our house to let herself in to Tumbledown Cottage if she should need anything, like a bowl of sugar or something. She would very regularly pick up our mixed-breed dog Pep, who looked like a cross between a golden retriever and a husky, and take him for walks with her 2 schnauzers, Topsy and Turvy. I was so grateful to Mrs. Beacon helping me out like this. One day Mrs. Beacon came back to Tumbledown Cottage in quite the panic, with Topsy and Pep at her side. She seemed eager to get into the house, but Turvy appeared to be missing. Mrs. Beacon looked as white as a sheet, but both Topsy and Pep seemed to be in reasonably good spirits, as if nothing fazed them at all. I'd never seen Mrs. Beacon looking quite so pale in all my life. I knew something dreadful had happened by the beleaguered, rather shipwrecked expression on her face. She looked distraught. Had something happened to Turvy, I wondered. I pretty much could read between the lines, and was assuming the worst. "You're trembling, Mrs. Beacon. Are you all right? What on earth is the matter? Where's Turvy? Isn't he supposed to be with you?" Mrs. Beacon said nothing, but stared vacuously into space. For a moment she looked almost like a mannequin. She seemed confused and disorientated, I grabbed her by the hand and led her into my living room, persuading her to sit down on the couch. She seemed so rigidly stiff and unyielding, sitting upright in the chair, still staring into space. Mrs. Beacon was breathing heavily. There were beads of sweat on her brow, and she shook like a baby's rattle. She was one of the strongest people I'd ever known, so to see her in this fragile, discomposed state was rather startling for me, to say the very least, leaving me feeling somewhat disquieted. I hoped that Mrs. Beacon wasn't going to tell me that Turvey had tragically run across the road and got run over by a passing car. But in our neck of the woods people drove with studious care, so driving fast down Madison Avenue was pretty much unheard of. I knew she had had some kind of a dreadful shock, and whatever it was, it had caused her great distress. Her eyes were round and almost glassy looking, as if she wasn't entirely with me in the living room, and was replaying what had clearly just happened to her in her head over and over again, like a video on rewind. Pep and Topsy had happily settled down at her feet, and seemed pretty calm and relaxed, but Mrs. Beacon was anything but. I knew she was trying to say something, but words failed to come out of her mouth, as if her tongue had been unfortunately tied. I'm sure I heard her mutter something about Turvey, so I was pretty sure something awful had happened to her dog. I knew for Mrs. Beacon, who had never had a husband or children of her own, that Topsy and Turvey were like children to her. So if she lost Turvey, she would be beside herself with grief. And as the dog wasn't with her now, it seemed reasonable to conclude that Turvey must have had a dreadful accident. I immediately dashed over to my drinks cabinet at the far end of my living room, and from the cupboard retrieved a bottle of brandy and a tumbler. I poured Mrs. Beacon a shot of brandy. They always said brandy was good for shock. I was sure it would help calm her down. "Mrs. Beacon, drink this, it's brandy. I'm sure it's going to help you feel better." Mrs. Beacon obediently took the brandy from me and swallowed it down in one gulp. It seemed to work a treat. "I just can't believe it," said Mrs. Beacon. "I can't believe it. It's just the most dreadful nightmare. Who would have thought it was possible?" She began to dab her brow with a tissue that she had pulled out of her jacket. "Look at me. I'm sweating like a pig. And it isn't even hot out there." "You've had a shock, Mrs. Beacon. Anyone can see that." "What can't you believe, Mrs. Beacon? Where is Turvey, Mrs. Beacon? Shouldn't she be with you?" "Turvey," said Mrs. Beacon. "Turvey." A big fat tear dribbled down her cheek. "I think I've lost my Turvey. I don't think my Turvey is ever going to come back to me. I think she's gone forever and ever. She's gone, Missy." At that, Mrs. Beacon began to sob inconsolably. I handed Mrs. Beacon a box of tissues, and she blew her nose and wiped the tears away from her eyes. "What happened to Turvey, Mrs. Beacon? Please talk to me. Maybe we can help her. Where is she?" After much nose-blowing and sniffling, I managed to pick up the gist of what Mrs. Beacon was saying. At first she spoke very fast, and then as her breathing subsided and slowed down, so did her voice. She wrung her hands together nervously, inhaled and exhaled a few times to steady herself, and said in a muted voice, "I was walking down the trail with Topsy and Turvey and your dog Pep in the woods, and I let them off the leash. You know what Turvey's like. She's the naughtiest dog of all of them. She was running ahead on the trail, hoping to stumble across a rabbit she could chase." "Oh, I know exactly what she's like," I laughed. "You forget I've taken your dogs for walks sometimes, and Turvey's got a mind of her own. She's quite a naughty thing. Always wants to investigate everything. Isn't that right, Mrs. Beacon?" "You're absolutely right. Turvey is headstrong, always has been. But on my walk this morning, Topsy and Pep stood resolutely by my side. But Pep was growling, as if he could sense something was amiss. I noticed both Topsy and Pep were not enthusiastic about their walk this morning and seemed reluctant to move forward through the trees. As you can imagine, this was idiosyncratic behaviour from them, as they're always so excited about their walks, even though they're a lot more skittish than Turvey. I think Pep picked up a strange scent in the woods of some kind that he didn't like and was not well acquainted with, so he was reluctant to move forward. Topsy never likes to leave my side anyway,
but even she was very apprehensive to move ahead down the Silver Gorge Trail, as if she was rather uncertain about something. I had to coax them forwards, you know, while Turvey took off as usual like a rocket into space. In truth, I've never ever seen Turvey this height before. While two of the dogs were reticent, it was like she was high on steroids, wagging her tail furiously, barking excitedly, and rushing full steam ahead. I had to call after her to slow her down, but she took absolutely no notice of me, because she can be mulishly stubborn at the very best of times. Well, I know what she can be like. You don't have to persuade me on that, Mrs. Beacon. Mrs. Beacon continued. Everything in the woods went very quiet. I've never known it to be like that before, but it did give me a very unsettling feeling. All of a sudden I heard a shrill scream. I knew it was Turvey and that she was in desperate trouble. She squealed out as if she was in pain. I didn't know what had happened to her, but it sent the fear of God coursing through every single cell of my body. It is not a sound you want to hear, your animal making. So I began to panic, and I ran towards the sound. But Pip and Topsy didn't run forwards with me, but shrank away. It was as if they were scared of something. I'm afraid I was so consumed with worry for Turvey that I didn't consider my own safety. And that was when I saw him. Oh, my God, there are no words, Missy dear.
Mrs. Beacon, you saw him. Who are you talking about? Who did you see? Mrs. Beacon's eyes grew round, as if they were standing up on stalks.
I don't know if you're going to believe me, Missy dear. I feel reluctant to tell you what I saw, but I promise you my eyes were not deceiving me. This thing was real. I promise you it was real. Even I thought I had to be dreaming. But I promise you I saw this thing as clear as day.
What did you see, Mrs. Beacon? Whatever you saw, I will believe you.
I saw a male Bigfoot, dear. That's what I saw.
A male Bigfoot, I said. What, on the Silver Gorge Trail in the woods? Are you saying you actually saw a Bigfoot? Are you absolutely sure about this?
Yes, I'm sure, dear. It was a male Bigfoot. I've never been so petrified. The thing was terrifying. It must have been about 8.5 to 9 foot tall. I can't be sure how big it was, but it was huge, and that's enough for me. It was covered in dark hair, and was looking at me through these dark, treacle-coloured eyes. But the worst part of it all, Missy, the worst part of it all, is he was carrying Turvey in his arms. I think he's going to eat Turvey, Missy. The creature was looking at me, but I refused to look back at it. I just couldn't. I turned around and ran. This thing was calling after me, shouting after me. I think it's going to eat Turvey. That's why my dog cried out. Oh, my God, poor Turvey. I can't imagine what he's going through. I've abandoned him, Missy. But I was too scared to face that Bigfoot. I just couldn't.
Of course you couldn't. You were scared, Mrs. Beacon. You've had a dreadful shock. It took an awfully long time to console Mrs. Beacon, because she was inconsolable. I helped her to her feet and walked her home. When we arrived back at her cottage, I was absolutely stunned to see that Turvey was at the front door, limping badly on his back foot. Mrs. Beacon cried out in delight, running towards her dog, embracing her with a warm hug.
Oh, Turvey! Oh, you're alive! Goodness gracious, you're alive! I thought that thing had eaten you. I can't believe you're safely home again.
She was deliriously happy to be reunited with Turvey. A trip to the vet confirmed that little Turvey had sprained her paw and was going to be absolutely fine, which was a relief for Mrs. Beacon. After Mrs. Beacon's encounter with the Bigfoot, she simply refused to walk the dogs on the Silver Gorge Trail. 15 years later, in 15 years my children had become feisty, opinionated teenagers, always giving me a hard time, as teenagers are inclined to do. I didn't have a dog anymore, after Pip had sadly died. I was so heartbroken I couldn't bring myself to replace him, even though my children begged me to do so. Instead, we got a cat. Mrs. Beacon was a lot more resilient than I was. When Topsy and Turvy had passed away from the effects of old age, Mrs. Beacon was absolutely devastated by their demise. She couldn't bear to be alone, so she acquired 2 more schnauzers, which she called Rose and Poppy. She was devoted to the both of them, and would talk longingly about her wish to take them on the Silver Gorge Trail again. But she was terrified of encountering that Bigfoot, whom she believed might be loitering around the grove, and might grab one of her schnauzers and eat it. She certainly believed Turvy had been very lucky and managed to escape the Bigfoot within an inch of her life. Instead, Mrs. Beacon would drive the dogs religiously to a doggy park, where she claimed they had a great time interacting with other dogs and owners alike. She had sworn me to secrecy about not telling any of the locals about her encounter with the Bigfoot on the Silver Gorge Trail, for she felt many might ridicule her about such a story. Mrs. Beacon's encounter with the Bigfoot had certainly had an impact on my life, making me both wary and reticent to ever go exploring the Silver Grove Trail at the back of my home, and I had forbidden my children to do the same, which was something they never understood. "Why don't you want us to play in the woods?" my son complained bitterly. "Everybody else in the neighbourhood goes in there. People walk their dogs there all the time. Why can't we go there?" "I would rather you don't go there, that's all," I said. "But you're pathetic, Mum. Why are you so overprotective? Anyone would think you would think something bad would happen to us in there. As if a mountain lion is going to grab us or something. What are you scared of?" "The woods can be dangerous, dear," I told my son. "You don't know what's out there, do you? I think it's better to be safe rather than sorry." For Mrs. Beacon's sake, I never told my children the reason why I didn't want them to go exploring in the woods, because if I merely suggested that there might be a Bigfoot loitering around, it would have driven my children directly to the woods, hoping that they would encounter the idiosyncratic creature. I knew my son was absolutely fascinated by the subject of Bigfoot, and for a long time had been hooked on a program called Finding Bigfoot. The last thing I wanted to do was to encourage him to go out and explore, and if he had the foggiest idea that a Bigfoot had indeed been sighted close to our home by Mrs. Beacon, well, I don't think I'd have been able to stop the enthusiasm from burgeoning inside him to catch a sighting of the creature that he really wanted to believe existed. One day, my sister, who was going away for a couple of days for a much-needed extended break with her husband, practically begged me to take care of her 7-year-old son, Lucas. I was reluctant to agree to watch over my nephew, as you had to have eyes in the back of your head with that one. I was, of course, grateful for small mercies, as my own children had never been nearly as mischievous as he was. I felt sorry for my sister, having to put up with such a naughty child, who was always inviting trouble in his life, as if it was his new best friend. 6 months ago my sister had discovered Lucas playing with matches in her home, and he nearly brought the entire house down in flames. Luckily the fire brigade got to my sister's house in plenty of time, and successfully managed to contain the fire. They informed her she was incredibly lucky, that not only was the house spared, but that the fire had not ended up in a devastating tragedy. On another occasion, the highly mischievous Lucas was told by both of his parents not under any circumstances to go playing around in the garage, and he failed to listen. He got trapped inside my sister's old freezer, and for once the freezer was not on. Had it been, Lucas could have frozen to death, for it was a long time before my sister actually found him. Then only 3 weeks ago Lucas climbed onto a bus at a local bus stop at the bottom of my sister's street, where he managed to artfully persuade a rather dithery absent-minded old lady, who didn't exactly have her wits about her, to buy him a bus ticket. The driver was successfully duped. He assumed the old lady was in Lucas's company, and was his grandmother. So Lucas ended up far away from home, and was found in a toy shop in a nearby town, playing around with all the toys. My sister was in a desperate panic when she couldn't find Lucas anywhere. She thought he'd been abducted. Luckily the manager of the local toy store made inquiries and reported Lucas to the police, saying that a little boy had been asking for his mother. My sister went racing off to the store to pick her son up, devastated that she had turned her back for a single minute, and he had sauntered out of the house like that. It came as no surprise to me that nobody had volunteered to take care of little Lucas while my sister and her husband went away, but I couldn't blame them for that.
because he was such an unpredictable child. But I'm a very big softie as far as my sister's concerned, and I knew how much she desperately needed this break away from her kid. So against my better judgment, I agreed to watch over him for a couple of days. Don't get me wrong, Lucas is a delightful little boy, and people always warm to him. The trouble is, if you told him not to do something, it's like a green light for him to do the very thing you've asked him not to do. I had tried, with not a great deal of success, to keep Lucas busily preoccupied. He was currently sitting at the kitchen table, drawing with crayons on paper, but he was already growing decidedly bored, and began to distractedly play with his toy plane.
I'm bored, Auntie Missy. I'm so bored. There's nothing to do, and I don't want to draw any more. I don't even like drawing all that much.
I tell you what, if you're feeling bored, let's go out of doors for a second. I need to hang out the washing on the line. You can pass me the washing and I'll peg it up on the line. It'll be fun, and you'll help me enormously. You want to help me, don't you, Lucas?
Do I have to? I don't want to hang washing on the line, and besides, I'm too short. I can't reach it.
You don't have to do anything you don't want to, Lucas. If you don't want to pass me the washing from the basket, that's fair enough. But you can watch me hanging out the washing on the line if you like, while you play with your toy plane. I said this because I knew I needed to keep my beady eyes pinned faithfully on that rambunctious ball of mischief that I didn't trust for a single second. My teenagers were indoors playing on their computers, and I knew that they would not be very good at looking after their cousin. They'd probably get easily distracted, and it would only take a second for him to wander off. Lucas very reluctantly followed me out of doors, wearing a hangdog expression on his face. He didn't look remotely amused. It really was a magnificently beautiful day, with the sky a cup of blue, and a generous sunshine sprinkled itself all over the yard. Lucas began to make the booming sounds of an aeroplane, as he pretended it was taking off into the sky. And for a moment, dare I say this, but he did seem to be rather enjoying himself. I believed the fresh air was doing him the world of good, and I'm sure he was taking pleasure in the warm sunshine that splashed itself over his face.
Look at my aeroplane, Aunt Missy. It can fly very, very high.
I can see that, Lucas, I said, smiling warmly at him. It's a very clever aeroplane, isn't it?
Aeroplanes aren't clever, Aunt Missy. You say silly things at times.
I began to steadily hang out all the washing on the line, which included some sheets and some clothes. I noticed that Lucas's curious gaze was now steadily fixed on the Silver Gorge woodgrove. I visibly sighed. The last thing I wanted was for Lucas to show any interest in those woods, especially after Mrs. Beacon had told me a while back about her scary Bigfoot encounter in there, and how little Turvey had potentially nearly ended up being eaten alive by the creature. I was not sure if his menu would extend to little boys like Lucas. Having said that, I doubted the Bigfoot would still be around, but you couldn't be too careful about such things, could you? Especially when it came to minding somebody else's child.
Look, Auntie Missy, said Lucas, pointing towards the woods. Someone is watching us, Aunt Missy. There's a man in the woods over there.
It might just be a dog walker, Lucas. Lots of people walk around in the woods on the Silver Gorge Trail. It's probably a rambler. It could even be a bird watcher.
Dogs! I love dogs! You think somebody's walking their dog in the woodgrove, Auntie Missy? I want to see their dog. If I go into the woods, I can see their dog, can't I?
Maybe you can, Lucas, but I'm sorry. You can't go into the woods.
But why not, Auntie Missy?
Because I said so.
Please, Auntie Missy, I'll be good, I promise you. I just want to see the dog if there is one.
I'm sorry, Lucas. I told your mum I would watch over you. So no, you can't go into those woods.
But I like dogs, Aunt Missy. My mother's next door neighbour, she's got 3 sausage dogs. I like sausage dogs the best. They look like hot dogs that you put in a bun. They're very long, and they've got nice ears. I really like them. Mummy says one day I can have a sausage dog when I'm older, if I promise to be good.
I'm sure they're very nice dogs, Lucas.
If you like dogs, I can get Mrs. Beacon to take you to the doggy park with her 2 schnauzers later. How about that? Will there be sausage dogs at the doggy park, Aunt Missy? Asked Lucas, sounding excited, his face lighting up like a Christmas tree. I don't see why not. I'm sure they have all kinds of breeds at the doggy park. And sausage dogs are a very popular breed, are they not? I tell you what I'll do. When we've finished hanging out these clothes on the line, I'll go indoors and give Mrs. Beacon a call. I'll find out when she's taking her 2 schnauzers, Poppy and Rosie, for a walk. You can go with her, I'm sure. She'd enjoy your company. But promise me if you go with Mrs. Beacon you'll behave yourself. Because if you do something silly, your mum will never forgive me. Do you understand, Lucas? Yes, Aunt Missy. I promise I'll be very good. I want to go to see the sausage dogs. I should have been a lot sharper on the uptake, and known by the fixated look on Lucas's face that he was secretly up to no good. He was staring at the woods rather ravenously, as if he was eager to go exploring on his own when my back was finally turned. You can't go into the woods, do you understand that, Lucas? If you do anything silly, you will not be going with Mrs. Beacon to the doggy park, and then you won't get to see any sausage dogs. Do you understand? Yes, Aunt Missy. I promise you I'll be good. Good, I'm glad to hear that. I don't even allow my own teenagers to go in there. So the last thing I'm going to do is allow you to go in there. But why not, Aunt Missy? Because it's not safe, that's why. Now let's go and call Mrs. Beacon, shall we, and ask about the doggy park. Yippee! Yippee! Lucas cried out, waving his model aeroplane around. I gathered my washing basket in my hands and assumed that Lucas was following me into the kitchen. But what I failed to realise is I'd left him standing by the washing line, completely absorbed in trying to fly his little toy plane. I retrieved my cell phone from the top of the kitchen counter and called Mrs. Beacon, and had quite a lengthy conversation with her. She said it would be an absolute delight for her to take little Lucas to the doggy park with her the following morning, and yes, there were plenty of sausage dogs there. Sadly, Mrs. Beacon had already taken her 2 schnauzers to the doggy park that morning, so she couldn't take Lucas that day. So I knew he'd be disappointed, but it just could not be helped. I'm just warning you, Mrs. Beacon. Lucas can be quite the handful. He's only 7.5. He gets up to all kinds of mischief. But he's staying with me for a couple of days. You'll need to keep your eyes pinned on him at all times, because he can so easily wander off if you're not paying attention. I thought I needed to warn you about that. I could tell you some stories about that boy that will blow your mind. He's always getting into mischief. It'll be a pleasure to take care of him, said Mrs. Beacon. Besides, I really love children. And you say he likes dogs? Yes, he loves them, especially sausage dogs. I imagine there are sausage dogs at the doggy park, are they not? They're his absolute favourite. Oh, you don't have to worry about that. Plenty of sausage dogs at the doggy park. So I think your nephew is going to be in his element. And there's a big dog there that I see every day. He looks like a huge teddy bear. He's got the most gentle nature. The children love him to bits. They circulate around him all the time. He's the size of a miniature pony, and I'm not exaggerating either. I asked the owner what breed of dog it was. Now, I forget at the moment. It was a Russian something. That's right, but I can't remember the full name of the breed. But nevertheless, it's a magnificently beautiful dog, and I know Lucas will adore him. His name is Fido. He sounds gorgeous, Mrs. Beacon. Thank you so much for helping me out. I'll see you in the morning. Did you hear that? Isn't it good news, Lucas? I'm so excited for you. Mrs. Beacon has agreed to take you tomorrow to the doggy park, and she says they've got lots of sausage dogs there, I said, disconnecting my call, and looking around the kitchen, expecting to see my nephew looking up at me with excited eyes. But where was he? He'd vanished from my sight. This was so typical of him. My heart did a huge somersault. This was the quintessential reason I didn't want to look after my sister's child. It was a huge responsibility. You had to have eyes in the back of your head with him. He would just disappear in front of you, rather like the Invisible Man. Where had he got to? I began to call out for Lucas, but he was nowhere in the cottage. I thought for a moment he might be playing hide and seek, and was half expecting him to jump out at me and say, "Boo! Boo, Auntie Missy! I got you! I got you! This isn't funny, Lucas, I called out. If you're hiding somewhere, you need to come out now, or you can't go to the doggy park. Unsettlingly, my words were met by an ominous silence. I wondered if Lucas was playing outdoors in the backyard, close to the washing line. Was he still engaged with his aeroplane? But as I entered the yard, he was nowhere to be seen, and my stomach lurched. I knew he had disobeyed me, and he must have gone off into the woods. I recalled the wistful expression on his face as he had stared longingly at the woods. My concerns were confirmed when I saw a corner of Lucas's shirt that he had been wearing had been ripped off and was dangling from a rusty nail in the wooden pole fence. He had crawled under the fence in our property and run directly into the woods. Would that child never listen? That boy was incorrigible. I even warned him that my children couldn't go into those woods because it wasn't safe in there. But still he refused to listen. My heart began to pound violently in my chest. My throat suddenly became scratchy and dry. I crawled under the wooden pole fence and made a straight beeline towards the woods, running as fast as I could. As I entered the trees, I saw a man standing there. I breathed a sigh of relief when I saw a child was with him. It was Lucas. But before I could reprimand Lucas for his insubordinate behaviour and apologize to the man, I gasped in abject astonishment when I realized the man that had been talking to Lucas was no other than Alex, my ex-fiancé, who had abandoned me 15 years before. What on earth was he doing here in the woods? In my opinion, he hadn't changed very much over the years. I thought he looked great, and instead of feeling angry and affronted by seeing him, all I wanted to do was to run into his arms, because I'd missed him so very much. "Alex!" I said. "Alex, is that you? Is that really you? What are you doing here in the woods?"
"It is me, Missy. It's been a long time, hasn't it?"
"You're telling me? Alex, but why? I don't understand. Why?"
"You mean why did I bog off 15 years ago? Is that what you want to know?"
"Yes. Why? I don't understand. I never understood."
"Because I was a bloody idiot, that's why, Missy."
"You were afraid of getting married, weren't you? And it's because of your mother, because of her long line of failed marriages. Is that why?"
"Yes, I'm afraid, Missy. I'm ashamed to admit it. You didn't deserve that. I should have explained, but I just couldn't do it. Is there someone else in your life now? Another man, perhaps?"
"There's never been anybody else but you, Alex. I thought you'd know that. You're the only man I've ever loved."
"I feel exactly the same way about you, Missy. I've never met anybody like you, and I've missed you so very much."
I'm not exactly sure what words were exchanged between us, but there were many. We hugged each other impulsively. Many tears were shed. "What were you doing in the woods?" I quizzed him again. "Anyone would think you were spying on me."
"Well, I pretty much was spying on you. There's no other way to put it. I just wanted to make sure you were all right. My mother assured me over the years you were all doing fine, and she was giving you the money I sent for you and the children. I just wanted to make sure that everything was all right and see you with my own eyes so that I could be assured about that. But coming here today and watching you hanging out your washing on the line has made me all but realize what a dreadful old fool I've been."
"I could have told you that a long time ago. It was the craziest thing ever, you walking away from us. We really needed you in our lives, Alex, but I suppose it's better late than never." Lucas was standing there grinning from ear to ear, saying, "So you two know each other then?" "Yes, Lucas. Believe it or not, I know this man very well. His name is Alex. We go back a long time." I took Alex's hand in mine, and we walked steadily back to the house. But when I turned around, Lucas was gone. The little brat had done a disappearing act all over again. This was so typical of him. "Oh, my God!" I said, turning around to look at Alex. "Where is Lucas? I thought he was following us. He's only gone and vanished again."
"I thought he was with us," Alex agreed.
"But he's not. He's only gone back into the woods. He's probably looking for somebody's dog to befriend. Goodness gracious me, that boy is driving me nuts. I can't wait for my sister to collect him in 2 days' time, because I've had about as much as I can take of that brat. We both made our way back to the woods and began to frantically search for little Lucas and earnestly call out his name. Lucas! Lucas, it's me, Aunt Missy! Where are you? We waited for a while and nothing happened, and I was becoming very distressed. And then coming through the trees all of a sudden, holding the hand of a Bigfoot, was Lucas himself. It was in that moment I nearly fainted on the spot. This was the kind of thing you'd expect to see in a children's fantasy book, but never in real life. I thought I would pass out and faint on the spot, but thankfully Alex gripped my hand firmly. "Come back here at once, Lucas," I cried out, trying to ignore the Bigfoot. "But I want to play with my hairy friend," said Lucas. The Bigfoot pushed Lucas forward very gently, so that the little boy reluctantly ran over to my side, not looking terribly pleased, of course. For a moment the Bigfoot's treacle-coloured eyes met mine, and I heard a voice in my head that I knew was not my own. The Bigfoot was communicating with me telepathically. "He's a naughty boy. I thought I ought to bring this little child back to safety." I stared incredulously at this magnificent creature, hardly daring to believe what I was seeing with my naked eyes. I suspect this was the Bigfoot that Mrs. Beacon encountered 15 years earlier, and I realized, to my delight, that he was completely harmless. I imagine, far from wanting to eat little Turvey all those years ago, he'd probably rescued the distraught dog from a nasty fall. Mrs. Beacon, seeing Turvey in the Bigfoot's arms, had assumed the very worst. Isn't it funny how a formidable appearance can make us believe the worst in someone? My friend Alice has a fearsome-looking pit bull, and even her postman is terribly afraid to go near her gate because of her pit bull. And yet Rusty is the biggest teddy bear you can ever hope to meet. He is lovable in every sense of the word. I sensed that, rather like Rusty, this Bigfoot had obviously drawn the short end of the straw. People always assume a creature as formidable as this is going to naturally harm you. As I was meditating over these thoughts while looking at the Bigfoot was reading them. He answered me in my head and said, "You're all safe in these woods. I am the watcher. You're safer in the woods than you are in your own home, because I am always watching." And with that he turned around and glided away. As you can imagine, I was quick to tell Mrs. Beacon about my bizarre experience with the Bigfoot. "Goodness gracious me! And to think I thought the creature was going to eat Turvey! He was so desperately intimidating, Missy. You must understand that." "But of course I understand that, Mrs. Beacon. You forget I saw him myself, and intimidating is certainly a word to describe him. But I think you misunderstood him, Mrs. Beacon. He intended to rescue Turvey, because Turvey was struggling to walk. I think your dog had a fall. He was carrying your dog. He had no intention of eating her. I'm sure he knew that Turvey was your pet. If you think about it, how did Turvey manage to escape a powerful creature's clutches like that? If the Bigfoot had wanted to eat Turvey, there is no way that Turvey would have safely returned home. Think about that for a moment." "Now that you put it like that, dear, I think you might be right. What a fool I've been. How could I have misread everything so dreadfully badly?" I am very glad to tell you that Mrs. Beacon resumed her dog-walking activity in the Silver Gorge woods, although she occasionally took her dogs to the doggy park. Lucas returned home to tell his mother that he'd met a very nice bear man in the woods. But my sister thought her child had a furtive imagination, and I certainly chose not to elaborate. As for me and Alex, we made up for lost time in a big way, and believe it or not, Alex got over his fear of getting married, so we both did tie the knot. My teenagers loved meeting their biological father, but no one is angry with Alex for running away from getting married, because we understood he had issues that he needed to sort out. But at the end of the day, we found each other again, and that's all that matters. As for my little nephew, naughty little Lucas remains as mischievous as ever, but then what can you expect from a boy like that? So there you are, that's my story.
Well, hello there. I hope you enjoyed the Omnibus edition. We've got many more coming our way for you to listen to. Sending you love wherever you are in the world, in North America, Canada, Kenya, wherever you may be. I send you lots and lots of love. Thank you for listening to my Omnibus, and I really do hope you enjoyed it, because that's the whole idea about it, is to give you some interesting stories to listen to. So until next time, goodbye and good night.